so I think,
90.2. It was 1920, right?
is that,
Yeah.
so that would count?
1920.
Okay. The other piece that I want to make sure we mention is sort of, there's been a lot of questions about sort of the digital divide and technology, and I think that should go in here. I think that was really impressive, that sort of
Distribution
rollout.
of laptops and hotspots.
Yep.
But, Jones?
The approval of the leasing of the 55,000 computers, that was July of last year, so that.
The plan to go one-to-one was developed in 1920, but we did not approve or start to implement until
So that would.
2021.
Yeah, okay.
I know, we're gonna get there, we'll be there.
So I think something like forward planning.
Yeah.
That would be in next year.
Any other highlights? I will say, although I do think that there is space to move, to continue to move forward with our mental health and social emotional learning, I would be remiss not to add that, if you all are okay with including this in our board statement, we got a mandate, a requirement to include 5 hours of mental health training or mental health education for students. And the superintendent and staff were innovative in choosing or developing Wellness Wednesdays, which spread that education out throughout the whole school year and allowed it to be something that was an ongoing conversation rather than a discrete, like one-time topic in your health class. And I will say from my perspective, I'm really grateful for that innovation and willingness to look at this over the course of an entire school year and meet those requirements. And if you all are amenable, I'd like to include that as well. Okay. Any other highlights? Okay.
May I have your notes?
Ms. Chastain, you may. I'm going to need them back because I have my policy notes on the other side.
Certainly.
Thank you so much,
And
Vice
what I
Chair.
recommend is that we recess this portion so that I can come up with a draft. I'll circulate because I'm not sure that I caught everything, but if you're like me, you would need to see it
Yeah.
to see how I put it together. So if we could, is this the last? We can
So
go
we
on
have
to
governance.
Yeah,
Is it okay if we go ahead and move on to governance?
yeah, that'd be fine, and then suspend this and then come back to it, take things out of order.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move to governance, and if you want to go ahead, since we're sort of in that vein, either Member Coker or Joyce, and just kind of tell us what's next for evaluations from the informal evaluation subcommittee.
So, former board chair, Jones was kind enough at the very end to, allow board member Joyce and I to work on a subcommittee to get the superintendent evaluations up to date. I am happy to report to you that according to the timeline that, was handed out about a month or so ago, month and a half ago, that we are right on schedule. Yay, check, check. If you look at February 9th on the first chart, we have actually completed the evaluations for last year. So we are good on that. You can actually put a big X on that first chart if you want to and know that it's done. That being said, we now need to start on the 2021 year. The 2021 year, all members will participate. Both of Ms. Pearson and I, Board Member Pearson and I, will actually join in this year. It starts on March 1st with the superintendent submitting proposed goals and targets for the 2021 year. As Ms. Chastain has referenced, there was not testing last year. The request would be that the goals and targets would include anticipated testing, and we might have to go back and redo if that doesn't occur. But we would anticipate this being a regular year. We'll board workshop that on March 16th, and we'll start our informal meetings for this year on April 1st through the 15th. So anyway, so we're in line, and I will remind you while that is all going on that the superintendent timeline in terms of getting the instrument ready for next year with the new strategic plan is well underway. AJ from Council of Great City Schools has been consulting and working with us on that. And so we're heading in that direction as well. So again, everything's up to date. Do want to make sure that Board Member Joyce and I thank Ms. Chastain for all of her efforts. She has been incredibly helpful in our subcommittee work, and we could not do it without her. And then also Ms. Young has been incredibly helpful in providing supporting materials. I think she's made more copies for us than we can imagine and has coordinated the calendars of the superintendent's office and the board office. So couldn't have done it without either one of those. So thank you to both of them for keeping us on track.
Do you know the next time that you're planning to meet to look at the evaluation tool? I can't remember.
We actually were scheduled yesterday, but there was a little bit of a glitch, and so we're looking for a date next week. We're supposed to combine calendars this afternoon.
So if you are interested in kind of taking a look at that evaluation tool that AJ provided and participating in the development of tweaking that for Duval, that would be a good time to hop in on that conversation.
Yeah, and through the chair, what I'll tell you is that the new tool is going to be a very different way of work for us in Duval. It's really getting away from the instrument we have now. This instrument dates back to Ms. Chastain. Did we figure out, was it Mr. Superintendent Wise? It's got quite the history.
It goes back many years, tracking each instance the strategic plan as would be in effect at that time.
Yeah. So we're excited that AJ is moving us forward with a more contemporary evaluation model.
I have a question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pearson.
Is there a reason that Board Member Joyce's name is not on this
Okay.
as participating?
No reason.
Okay,
Well,
just
that's
pointing
just
that
a
out.
correction. We'll get that done. Thank you for noting.
It was all Dr. Coker.
It was all me. I will say I typed it, so I'm sorry. I was probably sitting and talking to her while I was typing, and anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for catching.
Okay. All right, we have several other specific things that we need to get to for governance, and then I'll go around. Can we do a brief update from Vice Chairman Willie on the Oversight Committee?
Yes, the committee has met twice, and the first one was, both of them were sort of information sharing meetings with that group to get information about facilities. Mr. Soros came and Ms. Begley came as well to talk through that, and then Mr. Pierce did an amazing job. He brought out a shovel. If you did not know, he brought out the shovel because the shovel has come out of retirement. I think we need a reenactment of that, Dr. Pierce.
We do, at the March meeting.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. It was really engaging. But I think the committee is getting a lot of great information. In addition to that, they did select and vote on their chairman and vice chairman. Hank Rogers is the chair of that oversight committee, and Nate Day is the vice chair. Hank Rogers works for Amistar, but also a huge community advocate. Nate Day is with the Builders Association. I think the balance between the two of them will be good, and I think they're moving forward quite well as a group, and that'll be interesting to move into the next phase where I think they'll discuss sort of protocols and how they'll move forward with their other meetings. I forget the exact date. I'm sure someone knows the exact date. I'm looking to March. She's making me count. March 17th is the date of the next one, and these are all public. There were a couple of public comments, not heavily attended by any means, but I think as we move forward, I'm sure it will be. But excited about the group. The group is really eclectic with their different parts of the community that they're from, and I think they'll add a lot to what we're bringing forward.
And we won't receive any revenue until at least March, correct?
Yes, we believe either the middle or end of March.
And so when do you anticipate we could expect a first report from the Oversight Committee? Would that be maybe June or July?
I believe it would need to be June. I'm trying to think quarters in my head.
Yeah,
so.
because I know they only meet
Well,
quarterly.
they're probably meeting a little more frequently to get themselves set up and get information, but yes.
Through the chair, they could they could just report on what they've done. I think even if they don't report on the actual money, so that's something we as a board can
I think that would be good.
ask.
Would you guys like to invite the Oversight Committee to report in March, April? March?
I thought it was every quarter they meet.
They can. I mean, I'm trying to remember the policy. We'll have to look back at it, but there is a designated spot on the agenda for the Oversight Committee to report to the board. So maybe it would be maybe Mr. Rogers or some other designee could come. Ms. Young, sorry.
To the board through the chair, I don't have the policy directly in front of me, but I believe the policy says that the committee actually is to provide an update to the board after each meeting. Part of the conversation, Dr. Green has scheduled or reached out to schedule a meeting with the chair will be to talk about how to move that information forward. The policy also states that the committee must meet at least quarterly and provide an update to the board at that time as well. So coordinating the logistics of those updates is one of the next steps now that the chairman has been selected.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that update. Okay. The superintendent has also asked that we have a conversation about this building. So I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
On February 1st, I emailed the board and sent some information that, one, we are stating this is not our expertise of real estate sales and acquiring real estate. And so before we moved forward, I felt like I needed to come back to the board and get clarification, and moving through this process would require us to do either an RFP or an RFQ, either way, but it's going to cost us to move forward. And when I read the resolution, it was more that in March I'll come with a plan, but if that isn't what was in the resolution, if we needed to move forward with this, I felt like you needed to know that long before March, that we feel like we would need to go out for a consultant. A consultant would need to review our appraisal and make the determination of how the district should move forward. And it also, with receiving information about the Schultz Center, it kind of all I just felt like I wanted to bring it to governance and have a conversation. If the board is amenable, if we move forward, we would not have this RFP process done by the March workshop. So that's why I felt the need to send this email letter to the board and give some background information that we also are looking to the framework that JEA used when they relocated. And following what they did, they hired a consultant to help them move that process forward. So I just wanted to bring it up during governance.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Board Member Hershey, since you brought forward the resolution, can you just clarify for the board and for the superintendent, what was your intention of information that you hoped to receive back in March?
Well, when I brought it, my hope was in March that we would have some proposals by people in the community. Listen, before I was on the board, when my children, who are now adults, were in elementary school, there was conversation about being off the river. However, it has only been since Board Member Jones and I have been on the board that we've actually seen property value increase, and it becomes more of an option. I think 4 or 5 years ago, the value of the property was right around $8 million, 6 or 8 million. It's up now close to 11 or 12, might be 10, but it has increased. And my concern for this board is that the longer we wait, the greater our chances of not being in the driver's seat to have this conversation. And as was shared with us, I think at the board meeting in December, we got here because the lease was up and we had to move. And we landed here. We are in a position now to be in the driver's seat and to decide what is the best location. Is it a look of a different build? What do our building needs look like? Do we need the square footage that we currently have? I know that those are questions. Those might come through the consultation, but I have heard options for years. I know when I was chair, people brought recommendations, and I just the short answer to your question is I was looking for, okay, bring us your best offer. And let's go from there. And it might not be one of those. But I do think with the lease being up on the Schultz Center, it is a good time for the district to pause and say, what does our future in that area look like, if at all? I think because we are everywhere. We are in schools throughout the district. We are down at the Schultz Center area at Kroger. We're here. We've got to figure out where we want to be. Location has always been an issue. It was my hope that we would see some proposals, because everybody's got ideas. Nobody's brought us anything. Everybody wants to talk to us behind closed doors, but what's going to help us move? And last time we moved, we went from a lease to having no money to now being in a position where we do own property. And my concern is the longer we wait, it's going to put us out of the driver's seat. And I think the board needs to be driving the conversation, the superintendent, have the vision for what does it look like, and where do we go. If it's the recommendation to have, my question for a consultant is, what would they do and how long would it take? Because I think a lot of people have visions for us to not be here, but it's got to work well with us, so.
Okay, so thank you for that, because I think that provides clarity. The intention is to move forward with proposals to move off the river, and I do believe that was the conversation when we discussed the resolution, that it was to really seriously take a look at what would that be. And so my understanding from the superintendent is that there may be costs associated with really moving forward with either bringing in the consultants or the expertise to help us move forward with executing moving off the river. And so we need to give the superintendent just real clear direction about whether or not we want to invest in that process, and which will then take a little longer. And we can come back to the timeline. Board Member Jones and then Board Member Pearson.
Right, thank you. I think Board Member Hershey summed it up. We've had a lot of discussions with people who are interested in getting us off the river. The district moved here because nobody wanted to be next to a Southside generating plant. And so government moved here, and now that that's gone, this property value, and timing is good. The only concern I want to express is that we need to make clear to our public that we're not using sales tax revenue to relocate from this location. I think people keep asking, oh, you're going to use the sales tax because the timing of the passage of the half penny in November, and we are now looking to move off the river. So I always make that perfectly clear that we're not using sales tax revenue to make that move, so the public doesn't think we're using those dollars to enhance or improve our headquarters. And I think consolidation timing is good. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with Lori Boyer, who's director of DIA, and she said timing could not be better because there's so much interest and money in providing housing for downtown. So this is a prime location. As she pointed out, the property at the River City Brewing Company went for like $87 a square foot, far more than what the appraised value of this land is today. And that was just the land value. That was not the building. And most developers do not want the building, they just want the land. So, but I think looking at relocating, and I don't know what that cost would be to do RFP to hire a consultant, but I think that's the proper way to go based on the discussions I've had with a number of developers and individuals who have done this time and time again.
Member Pearson.
My question is, do you have through the chair, do you have an idea of how much it would cost to hire a consultant? It's hard for me to say yes, do it without knowing how much we're talking about spending.
Is Mr. Sora sitting behind me?
Through the chair to Ms. Pearson, we would go through what's called an invitation to negotiate process and discuss exact scope based on a generalized scope of them coming in, looking at this building, potential options, developing some type of package, and then helping us with its solicitation, we're estimating in the $150,000 to $250,000 range. And that's just a rough estimate, and it's going to be controlled by the negotiation we go through them to nail down the final scope.
I think that if we are ready and we are serious, we want to capitalize on the value of this property and the time that is now, then we need to give the superintendent and the staff permission to move forward with this process. I think we also need to understand that that invitation to negotiate is going to maybe take some time, and that what she's already shared with us is that won't come back in March. So my next question would be, when do you think we might get some more information about what happens next?
Through the chair to the board, we will keep the board informed along the way. It is just the resolution said, bring back something. I'm playing in March. Well, if we're ready, if this is the direction, it has to go through that whole RFP process, which I don't see Mr. Suarez, but in my mind, June would probably be the earliest that all of those steps would be completed. Is he nodding or not nodding?
Yeah, he says, yeah, maybe. Yeah. I would say, this conversation for me is at least a good place. So I don't know that we landed maybe where you wanted to end up, Member Hershey, but if we are all amenable, but we want to move forward, then we may circle back around a little later than March.
If this hiring of the consultant gives the superintendent an opportunity to develop a vision for what does district work look like, what does district space need? I've been on some floors where there are cubicles and desks that are empty now. Right. You know, and so I know when you put out an RFP, they want to know what's the square footage. Do you need a cafeteria? Do you know, how many meeting rooms? And so if this gives the superintendent an opportunity to develop a vision for, do we want to be in close proximity? I think some of those questions some of those questions have to be answered before you put out an RFP, because those are questions people want to know. What's the square footage? What are the needs? And you put in a kitchen in an office building and it's going to be more expensive than one without it. Do you need a parking garage? Do you not need a parking garage? So if it's going to give the superintendent, and I don't know with our district staff if we have people working from home at all on any level now, and administrative positions, but again, COVID is here, and the way we work has changed. So if it gives the superintendent that opportunity, then I think it's worth the investment to make the right decision and not something that's rushed.
Through the chair to board member Hershey and the board, it sounds like we'll move through that process, but in March, even though that process will not be complete, we can come back and share in March. Here are the considerations that we've made clear that the consultant has to say, well, this is priority 1, 2, 3 of the things that the district needs. And here are some things that, even though that is a priority, we just don't think we can get it done. Example, everybody in one building. I still don't think we can get that done, even though we may be asking for a larger space just based on some of the activities certain departments. So, for example, school choice. It needs to be somewhere where parents have freedom of parking. That's not always the main district office. So we can do that in March, but did not think we could wait to March to say we need to do this.
I would support that vision. I think it has to be determined, and otherwise we get an RFP that's not helpful.
Any concerns about moving forward with an invitation to negotiate? Board Member Jones.
No, I think that's the proper course. I just want to make sure that we do examine all those options, whether or not we be in one building and sell those other properties that could benefit the district. There are that option need to be explored also, because there are developers who are interested in some of the other properties that we have if we were to consolidate. And there have been discussions about a facility that would serve both purposes and is large enough to do both. The school choice piece with the parking and the headquarters building all in one location.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. I think that's a perfect segue into a discussion about the Schultz Center, because we we do have many of our offices and departments over in the Team Center, and we have other properties, and so we would like to have a moment to have a conversation about the Schultz Center. Maybe Ms. Chastain, would you mind sharing this letter here?
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. Good morning again to the board. I've made photocopies of 3 documents, and I separated them by blue page. I'm sorry I put it together quickly this morning, but essentially you have at the bottom the June 3rd letter of 2020, where the Schultz Center is asking to extend the lease, which presently expires June 30th, 2021. In the middle is the December 10th, 2020 letter with the Schultz Center's proposal, which combines professional development services as well as considerations for the extension of the lease. And at the top is a January 26th, I believe, 2021 letter from Dr. Green to me commenting on that middle document, the December 10th proposal from the Schultz Center. I want to provide a little bit of background information before we get into a discussion of how to respond to the Schultz Center. The Schultz Center was incorporated at the end of 1998, and immediately thereafter in the 1999 legislature, that following spring, the legislature did 2 things. It created for the first time a statute that provided for a regional professional development academy, and this is important. And it also approved an appropriation to Polk County and to Duval County to an entity with a slightly different name. I'm not quite sure how it's related to the Schultz Center, but those 2 pieces of legislation traveled together because the appropriation was to provide for startup funds in the event that the legislature passed this statute for the Professional Development Academy. And it was $4 million, and it cited 2 requirements in the legislation as it existed at that time to be eligible for the startup funds, including many details, but one of which was a match of dollars. And the reason why I'm going through this history is when you look at the February, I think, 2001 lease between the school board and the Schultz Center, where the Schultz Center is the tenant now in the building as we know it, the opening pages talks about $8 million, that's the $4 million and the $4 million match that the Schultz Center provided for renovating the building for the purpose of this academy. I'm going into that detail because one of the board members called me a few weeks ago and said, I don't know, we need to look at that $4 million. And I did look at that in detail. It's startup funds. This was 22 years ago. I think we're well beyond the startup phase. And the statute, although it's been amended several times, referred to startup. It doesn't provide for any clawback or continuing, use or anything like that. So I think that history is important. Shortly thereafter, in 2001, the lease was signed. It originally was for 10 years. It was supposed to expire in 2011. There was an amendment extending the lease to June 30th, 2021. The Schultz Center pays $1 in rent annually. The Schultz Center is supposed to use the premises for operating this academy as well as training purposes. The school board maintains the facility and repairs the facility and pays for all utilities. So we have one document, which is the lease, which is I think the focus of the conversation. But there were also for many years a second document, an annual operating agreement, which the board would come to the board for approval, and it would be the services that the Schultz Center for the school board's payment of fees and provision of in-kind employees and services. The Schultz Center would design and implement professional development opportunities on a variety of matters. I don't have the depth as to what those topics were, but there was a services contract annually, together with the lease that continues, through as extended June 30th, 2021. Over the years, you know that the State Auditor General comes every 3 years and does an operational audit. And there were numerous findings by the Auditor General in relation to the operating agreement. Things about comments would be that the district needed to enhance its procedures for monitoring reimbursements and facility use fees from the Schultz Center for Teaching and Leadership. That was in the 2011 AG report. 3 years later, in the 2014 report, there was another finding that the district needed to enhance its procedures for monitoring payments to the Schultz Center. This finding was based on the 12-13 operating agreement. The report concluded that absent sufficient and appropriate monitoring procedures, the district has limited assurances that funds provided to the center are expended for authorized purposes as prescribed in the contract, and that services to the district are commensurate with the funds paid to the center for those services. Similar findings were noted in the 2008 and the 2011 audit reports. Somewhere, I think it was as soon as the next year, in 2013, 2014, the superintendent no longer brought forward an operating agreement for board approval, and there hasn't been an operating agreement for services ever since. The lease, of course, continues because of the terms of the lease. That has continued. So that's the background before I get to the package of letters that I provided to you. The June 3rd letter, which is at the bottom, is the Schultz Center's formal notice that they elect to exercise their option to extend the term of the lease as agreed under Section 6 of the lease agreement. At the time, when I spoke to different board members who are attorneys of the Schultz Center, they were taking the position that it's an automatic renewal. I disagree that that's what the lease says. The lease says that although the tenant is granted an option to extend the term of this lease, it also says for a period of time and under conditions to be determined. So there's still a conversation to be had. If it were just automatic, the language would have said on the same terms and conditions for blank years. It would be self-executing, but it's not. And that's why we're here today to talk about what happens next. In the middle, you have the December 10 follow-up correspondence from the Schultz Center, which I had some difficulty discerning what the proposal is, but I think the proposal is some sort of combination of an operating agreement again, as well as the request to renew the lease. And it seemed like depending on how it went one way might affect the other document, if that makes sense. That being said, Dr. Green at the top provided to me her January 26th letter where she provides her observations and she makes the following recommendations. That the offer to purchase additional services is declined at this time, but that the lease be renewed, negotiated and renewed. Of course, this is all subject to board approval, to renew the lease annually because of our space planning that we just talked about. That the district, because it owns the facility, continue to maintain and repair the facility at the district's costs. Obviously continue to currently lease the current administrative space that the Schultz Center uses to them, but that the district receive a guaranteed number of days to use the facility, the different conference rooms, A, B, and C. Presently, we have to pay to use it. We're almost like subleasing the facility and paying rent back to ourselves, that a certain number of days be negotiated for the district to use those conference rooms at no charge. Dr. Green, of course, is here. She can speak to her own letter if I've mischaracterized or left anything out. No, she's giving me the thumbs up, I think. So where are we? With that background, I think of it, I'm not telling you what to think, but I think of it as we have two sets of documents. We have, I don't want to call it an operating agreement anymore. I would rather call it a services contract, and if there is any movement toward that it be much more simplified as to how we write our contracts now, which we don't get audit findings, that the services and then the facility lease. I think those are two different things, and how do we move forward with that? If you want to renew the lease, I don't necessarily recommend that it's just renewable annually, because I think we're just in this constant conversation. If it's annual, it may be possible that depending on all the space planning, that maybe 2 years might be sufficient time, something like that. I'm just trying to get out of this constant planning and constant conversation if we have some idea that we may not be ready in a year to take the facility back, if that's the will of the organization. So if you want to renew the lease, how long? Does the Schultz Center pay rent? They presently don't pay rent now. Even if they don't, I would recommend some holdover provision that when the lease ends, that payments need to be made, a financial incentive to vacate. Would the district continue to maintain the premises and repair at its own expense? It just seems to be a cost that we're used to doing. That seems reasonable. Do we continue to provide utilities? Perhaps the answer to that is yes, with a slight caveat that due to E-rates, maybe not phone and internet. We're exploring that right now, whether we can do that. I would want to look at updating the insurance requirements. I don't know that 2001 standards, that's a red flag to me. I would want to take a look. I think it's a good suggestion to be negotiated that the district has the ability and priority in scheduling the conference rooms a certain number of times at no additional cost, and anything else that you might think of. So that was a long monologue, but I wanted to bring you all the way through to where we are now, and hear your feedback. Because if, for example, if you were to say, Ms. Chastain, please draft something, those are my questions. I don't know what to draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for clarification, before we hop into this, the letter that Dr. Green has provided looks to recommend not continuing with an agreement for operating services, but an offer to extend the lease. Is that correct, Dr. Green?
Through the chair, yes. Did you say not to continue to offer? Because they haven't been offering operational services to us for since a long time.
Continue to operate.
Right. Maybe for labels, we can call it services contract. It was historically called an operating agreement, but I think the purchase of services might be an easier way to think about it and discuss it.
Okay. Board members, thoughts, questions?
I have some questions, but
Board Member
Board Member
Jones,
Jones can go
Hershey?
first.
You go ahead. Ladies first.
You are so sweet, Warren. This is a complicated question to answer, and what I will just share from my time on the board is board members before me said this day was coming, and there's this perception that the district was going to somehow, you just get it back. You know, they hand you the keys back, it's ours now, then we decide what to do with it. That was a perception that I always had, was that 2020 hit or whatever, and that was the end of the relationship with the physical presence in the building. So obviously there's a different desire. So I have a couple of questions to the chair, to the superintendent. One is the hiring of the consultant that we just discussed for the RFP. Is there room in that conversation for the district to figure out what we, or the district wants to do, or how we want to use that space, or if that space is worth us maintaining? I mean, is that something that, a recommendation that could come through that consultant, or are we talking about something different?
Or do you
Due
have
the chair to board member Hershey, yes, that is a possibility the consultant could state. Because we need the consultant to look at all of our properties. There is a state law, statute that we can only have so much ancillary property in utilization. And the reason we can't just all of a sudden go build something is because the Schultz Center is considered Duval County Public Schools. It's considered auxiliary space, but we're not using it. So that consultant has to take into account that location, where our police department's located, all of those spaces to come up with a plan. So short answer is yes.
And I raised that question because that decision then gives answers to other questions like, is it to our advantage to maintain ownership of the property at its current level and usage? And we just heard an example where it may not be, not saying that it can be different, but things that we have to consider. That would be I would agree with Ms. Chastain's recommendation that if we were going to respond today or anytime soon, that there will be a renewal for a 2-year period, but with a date certain that after that, that contract may not be renewed. I don't foresee, even though I like for things to work fast, I don't foresee a recommendation from a consultant. I mean, I don't see things happening, within the next 2 years where there might be a need to be out. But I think that if we are not using the services, which was the original intent, it's a very different conversation. And from my recollection, that break and desire for services started with Dr. Vitti, and then under Dr. Willis's leadership, there was expansion of internal professional development versus professional development from outside the district. That's my recollection. And so I do appreciate Ms. Chastain kind of pulling those two pieces apart, because when you put them together, it makes it complicated. But if you say, okay, we've got the original intent was for services provided, we're doing it differently now. Now we need to look at it from, we've heard Board Member Pearson use the word fiscally conservative perspective of, how does it impact the different district, not only from a financial standpoint, but from the standpoint that Dr. Green just shared as far as space and our usage of it.
Thank you, Board Member Hershey. Board Member Jones.
Well, thank you. I'm sensitive to the history. I know former board member Cheryl Grimes and DTU President Terry Brady was very involved, and so I'm very sensitive to that history, understanding though that the purpose and need of that facility has changed, and that if we are getting AG's report critical of that use, then we need to address it. And but I do agree that we need to extend it for more than 1 year. I mean, if we had a consultant report back in a year, we wouldn't be able to move in a year anyway, so we wouldn't need the property, certainly if that was a desire of this board. But I think, you know, I just wonder, what are our operational costs? What are the utility costs? I mean, those are factors that I would like to know so that I can make an informed decision as to whether I want to renew the lease and how do I renew it? Do I renew it with them paying the utilities and operational costs? You know, because we own the building. So those are some concerns I would have as a landlord of that property.
Dr. Green, do you have information, or does anyone have information today related to costs associated for the district?
Through the chair, we have some, we would have to get that to you, but.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
I
We have
saw
it,
Mr.
but-
Suarez down there, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to share if you had that readily available. Board Member Coker.
So two parts for mine. One, I know that right now, having been over there for different items, that they often have trainings for Baptist over there, for CNAs and nurses and things like that. So it's become a place where community goes for training. Is there an advantage to continuing, and this maybe goes along with the utilities, just fact finding, to having that on the days we're not using it continue? But do we make the money to offset, you know, some of those other costs, or, you know, how does that all work? And so that's a fact-finding item, because I've seen a lot of people over there doing that. And then the second, on the services contract side, I just, as a board member, want to say that I think it's imperative that our academic services division has control over professional development for teachers to ensure that it's aligned with the curriculum that we are implementing within our schools. I will say, knowing the history of this, there was a disconnect at one point. The superintendent wanted training here, and there was some training being offered here, and it didn't completely match. And in fairness to our superintendent, this gets evaluated on our curriculum and on the test scores. We need to know that the training that we're offering matches up, and so I want to be careful about the services piece.
That makes sense. The first question you asked about offering trainings to the community and ongoing trainings, you know, that the building be used for that. Are you suggesting that that just be a consideration in a lease cost? Or are you maybe suggesting that we ask for some portion of that?
No, I'm saying that I don't know moving forward if it's a good thing to continue that or not. I don't know enough to know. I'm looking for information on, would it benefit if it continued? Does it not benefit? I don't know, because I don't know how much is done, how much money, how much revenue is generated. I don't know anything about it. I just know I see a lot of people that aren't Duval County in the building when I'm over there.
Ms. Chastain, do you have guidance on that?
Perhaps to explore revenue sharing, or at least be informed of the revenue as to negotiating with the tenant about rent, utilities, maintenance, something like that. In other words, it's part of the financial review to inform us to make decisions, I think is what I heard.
Yeah, I think that's
Through the chair, absolutely, because right now, I don't think we know how much is generated from those rental of the rooms, and if we were to able to know that, it could potentially impact the agreement.
Thank you, Board Member Coker. Additional thoughts?
I'll mention, I think to the points that were already made, it would be interesting to see some of the data, sort of the costing model and how they're bringing in revenue and how much that is. And I know there's a lot of history, and I remember we sat, I guess a couple years ago at a meeting with them and kind of went through some of it. But it's still one where I think, I know I don't have as much clarity on how it all works, like how the Schultz Center works, like how they're making money, and I know other groups have come in, and so I think just figuring that part out. But all that being said, I do think to give us the time that we need to make the decision, I would more than be agreeable to a shorter term lease, especially if we get some of the pieces that Dr. Green has mentioned here.
Dr. Green, do you have a vision or perspective on how long it will take for us to make some more, concrete decisions about how we want to use these auxiliary properties?
Through the chair, when you say concrete decisions on how we want to use the Schultz Center.
Concrete's probably a not a good word.
Never.
A not concrete word, a not concrete. Just an idea. Do you think that it's going to be something you see taking 2 years, 1 year, 5 years? Where do you see this? I mean, because you're talking about moving forward with an intention or an invitation to negotiate with a consultant right now. I mean, I know that you don't like to drag your feet. You're a bold, fearless leader.
Even, let's just say all of the stars lined up and everything was moving perfect. 2 years is still not enough time. The Schultz Center would need its own set of renovations to take place before the district could even consider saying, okay, if that was a decision that we chose that scenario to move to the Schultz Center. So,
If I may, so I heard 2 years isn't enough time, but how much time would be needed before the building was available to us to renovate?
well, it would be probably between 2 to 3 years. It would be within that.
So 2 years sounds like a conservative place to be with an option to renew if needed for another year.
Well, if I can get Mr. Suarez to agree with my first school opening up timeline, I will move this faster and we can move in a new building and open the school at the same time.
What I could suggest is a 2-year term with, which takes no further action if that's the agreement by either party, if we're all signed, sealed, and delivered. I don't want to create ambiguity because it's this option to renew language that, the parties don't seem to have a meeting of the minds, with maybe one potential, but both parties have to agree. I mean, that puts the owner back in the driver's seat that, oh, I'm moving along faster than I thought, sorry, I'm not doing it. I'm a little uncomfortable given where we are right now with that suggestion, which isn't very concrete about agreeing to agree later. But if it's something that you wanted to consider, I can.
The only reason I ask is because what I don't want to do is not be able to collect some revenue for space. I don't want to just be sitting unused, useless, not generating anything. And so who knows what will happen over the next couple of years and how we might get, timelines delayed. That's kind of would be my question about wanting to make sure that, if there's an intention or desire to continue to use the space, that we allow them to be able to use the space. But it's certainly mutually agreed upon would need to be it. Vice Chairman had a question. Do you have another comment? I feel like you're
Wait.
Just really quickly for sort of to round out the conversation, if we were not to renew this lease, what would happen from our end? And I'm wondering too, since we were sort of paying rent for the Schultz, I wonder what that does to their sort of viability too. And maybe you can't answer that, but can you answer sort of, if we were not to renew this lease, what would that mean for us as far as where we're bound or connected to it?
Through the chair to Vice Chair Willie, in my long narrative, I described that the two attorneys on the board that I spoke to, we have a disagreement about what the language says. They framed it as, and in their correspondence, they have an option to renew. Once they send that letter, it's renewed. I pointed out that the lease language does not provide specified terms and conditions. It's to be negotiated, so there is no automatic renewal, and we have to negotiate that. Absent that, in my opinion, the lease ends. Now, I'm not a judge, so if this went to litigation, I can't say where that would go, but it is my observation that there's not a meeting of the minds as to what that language says. It is my position on behalf of the board legally that the lease ends June 30th, 2021, absent a further signed agreement. So what happens next? If a tenant holds over, and that means the lease is ended, but the tenant didn't leave, that's a holdover tenant. Florida statute provides for non-residential tenants such as this one, that unless the lease says otherwise, and it doesn't say anything, that the tenant pays double the rent. Okay, so they pay $2.
For that.
That's why I'm suggesting that even if you don't pay any rent, that there be express language negotiated to address a holdover situation as a financial incentive for any tenant. I used to represent a lot of landlords, so for any tenant to leave. Worst case scenario, if a tenant doesn't leave, and I'm not saying that this is what the Schultz Center is going to do, I'm speaking theoretically and academically, the landlord would have to authorize, the board would have to authorize a lawsuit to evict. So, also, we pay the utilities. We could take the position that we have no obligation to anymore. We could literally turn out the lights and see what happens. I'm just thinking worst case,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to go
academically,
to that place,
this
if that's
is an
where we're
academic
suggesting we
discussion.
would do. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting, that these would be any of the decisions. This is just a theoretical, what would be a landlord's options in this scenario. Yeah.
I do think we need to get to at the end of this discussion. So, any other final thoughts, Board Member Hershey?
A couple of things. If we did a 2-year contract through the chair to Ms. Chastain, that would put us at 2023. Is that correct? Can we renew for 2 years with date certain that that's it? Or should there be an option that there would, or do you leave it open for negotiation? Because it's kind of two things here. It's kind of delicate because you want to respect the partnership. And to me,
Absolutely.
my perception is it's, I'm going to use the word reckless, to not renew currently when we don't have a plan.
Right.
So to me, if the superintendent said, I think we should sell the space. I'm making that up because this will give us, we can use it doing something, or we should keep the space because this is the vision. We don't have that. That is coming. It's a process. Just doing a kind of a realistic timeline. If you think about 2023, you think about we're getting the recommendation from the consultant. We're figuring out what our vision is for that space, that building for us. And as for a district, realistically, getting a proposal, getting RFPs for where we're going to relocate, it's not going to be 2023. It's going to be longer. So I'm just wondering can we do what would your recommendation be, Ms. Chastain, to the board regarding a date certain of 2 years? Do you leave it open-ended or do you close that loop?
Through the chair to Board Member Hershey, as I gather direction for a proposal back to the Schultz Center, whatever it is we decide, the message that I want to bring back is this needs to be clear. We can't find ourselves, both parties, with a disagreement about what the language means. I think we're all landing on, at a minimum, 2 years for certain. We just don't know if, that's
There's an option to extend.
timing-wise, if that's the right time point. I mean, it's hard to say a year from now, much less 2 years from now, would the board be ready to take the building back? And so what I'm hearing is, in recognition of the partnership and communication, this gives the Schultz Center time to plan and adjust where, what might lie ahead. So I like the 2 years for certain. And I think I'd mentioned earlier, at least, because we seem to be waffling on whether it's 2 or 3. It seems to be what I'm hearing. I don't have a crystal ball to know if it'll be longer. Maybe build in like 6 months before the expiration, so it would be December 31 is not a great time. Let me think about that. But a time certain, whether it's 7 or 5 months ahead of time, if the parties wish to mutually agree and sign through all the approvals that we have to go through a one-year renewal on the same terms and conditions, but that it requires an affirmative action at that point, maybe one more year, and I can prepare it with as much certainty as possible, so that if for some reason one of the if they don't initiate, it goes away. So I don't think it matters for the board, but if the board is ready to take possession back on July 1, 2023, or at some point, the board can communicate back, please plan, you have 5 or 7 months that this is ending on June 30th, 2023. Does that make sense? I'm thinking
It makes sense to me.
communication.
I would be comfortable with that personally, just because who knows what'll happen with our ability to move forward at that timeline. Is that something that would be?
Can I
saying
just
yeses?
make one other quick point, because we haven't talked numbers.
Right.
I just,
why-
we rent, we own the building, but we rent the space. And I think last year I had emailed the superintendent, probably a month or so ago, and I think we spent $152,000 last year in renting space. So it's a unique relationship to be a landlord and own the building, but then pay for space, and provide all maintenance too. So it's kind of complicated, but I do agree with a 2-year. I like Ms. Chastain's thought process of here's your loophole, a 5 months or 3 months or whatever, if there's a desire to extend it in any way, but I am hopeful that allowing the superintendent to hire a consultant will help us have an overall vision for the district in that space specifically.
Agreed. I do want to get to how we can get to a space for some numbers before we wrap up this conversation. Did you have something else to add, Ms. Joyce?
I just want to say, I don't think the problem is we own the building and we pay for it. We lease the building. We lease it to them. The
$1.
issue is we are responsible for how much we lease the building to them for.
Right.
So if it's $1, then that's on us.
Mm-hmm.
If we lease the building to them, that's where we have to make the adjustment moving forward, if that's the issue.
Right.
So what I think at this point, what would be helpful is to know what are we actually spending, what is the cost of the district, and I think that what I've heard here today is that we are able to get some sort of financial revenue snapshot of what's actually happening at the Schultz. Now, I don't know how to get that information from them, or if that's even a reasonable thing to ask for, and so that I'm not sure about. And then if we can get that information back from the district, that'll help us decide sort of how to move forward, because we are just one side of the negotiation here, the contract. And again, we are not interested. We have already taken over the services, so the services are off the table. We're just looking to lease the space for something more than $1 that would be in fairness to the partnership that has been longstanding. And so that we are able to use the space at no cost to us for the use of our property.
Right, with a negotiated number of days and certainty of priority and scheduling. There's a business example where you don't want to say when available because it won't be available. So we would want to build in assurances of the availability.
When do we need to get this done?
That's my next question, is how do we, so the sooner the better, and I think with this letter, this request hanging out there for a little while, building a timeline for a formal reply back to the Schultz Center. If we can't finish that today, because I hear that there are some questions, Dr. Green has some suggestions too, certainly by next week, because we meet again next week. I don't know.
Dr. Green?
Well, Karen, we were thinking, I was going to say that between us, we could meet and draft a letter ready to go by our meeting next week, and then board can say, yes, this is what we want, therefore the letter can go forward.
And we can have some more information about,
You'll have the information about what they're paying
Costs.
for, what we're paying for, maintenance and utility costs. We'll have to, I guess we'll need to figure out how to get their financials.
maybe.
Yeah, through the chair, and to the board and Dr. Green, if nothing else, it could be the district's analysis and kind of a complete formulation of a recommendation and explain to the board the reason why, we're recommending this is because we looked at this financial information and this is the conclusion we came to. I do want to note, I don't hold out a lot of hope. They're a private entity. These aren't necessarily public records as to are having access to, their private sources of revenue. So I want to manage expectations in that regard.
Great. This has, I know, been something that has been kind of looming, and so I'm glad that we were able to get moving in a direction on the Schultz Center. Thank you all for participating in the conversation. Thank you, Ms. Chastain. We look forward to receiving that from the superintendent so that we can move forward and get back to them. And again, respect that partnership. They have been a valuable institution for many, many years. The services provided by the Schultz Center to our educators, it was a real retreat, right? I mean, I know Board Member Joyce has talked about going there and being treated like a professional, and you get to have this learning space. And so we are very, very grateful for that. We are just at different times, and we've evolved, we've all grown, and this is an important decision that has to be made about the district and what is responsible for Duval County Public Schools. Okie dokie. Thank you, board members. We have a couple more things, and then we still have an audit selection committee meeting this afternoon. So if we want to circle back around briefly to the statement, is that what you want to do, Ms. Chastain, or should we look at the strategic plan?
Madam Chairman, it's at your pleasure. I just thought if I passed it out, we'd remember that we have to get back to it. So whenever you wish to take that back up.
Let's go ahead and put a button on it. Would you mind reading it for us, for the record?
Perhaps we could just take a few minutes to read. I may have literally typos. Did I
Okay.
capture your comments, things like that? I tried to get this ready as quickly as possible.
I have one thing that I would like to correct. Board members, do you have any corrections
I have a question.
or additions?
I just have
Pearson?
a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Referendum, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet point. referendum and education campaign for state sales surtax? Is it local sales surtax or?
It's actually, I think, state, but I can,
Florida state.
yeah.
Okay. And then just on the recommendations, bullet 2 doesn't have a period after it, but all the others do, so either all do or all don't?
I added it.
Okay.
I just needed more eyes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Do I see a hand down here? Yeah, Hershey?
Where it says build more community partnerships, and I heard what Board Member Joyce was saying. We can build partnerships, but they have to align. I would prefer it say align.
I had depth,
Okay,
right, to
you just-
deepen instead of more.
But because
Build depth.
build, like, okay, you can have all this, but is it getting us where we want to go? We need partnerships that get us to where we want to go, and we also need to be able to say this is where we want to go, and can you come along and help us? So, partnerships for the sake of partnerships.
Right.
I questions partnerships with the sake of a common goal. I don't know how to say that, but if we could word that a little differently.
That was the one change I had as well.
Alignment of.
I would say that I would, community partnerships should be a priority and that we should encourage and support these investments. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not just building. I agree with Board Member Hershey. It's that we are prioritizing and investing with them. You know, make there's just,
It's collaborative?
it's not, it's a collaborative is a great word, because in my thought process in this, the concern was, we have city money coming, we have walls and fights and communication gaps with people who want to come in and invest in our schools. So we have to communicate and collaborate in a better way to encourage and support these.
But that has to align
With-
with the direction of the district, because there are a lot of people who want to do things, but it's not always in the best interest of the district for them to do those things.
Right.
So there's got to be some, just because somebody wants to give, you know, we want to see this here, does that align with the overall strategic plan and direction of the district? So I get the collaboration piece, but just because somebody wants to do something doesn't always mean it's in the best interest of the district and the students. I mean, I think you have to be, because I see Ms. Chastain,
I'll take
our
a-
wordsmith.
I'll
Let's
take
see what you've got
a
here.
stab at it. Encourage and support community partnerships in alignment with district priorities.
The only caution about the district priority piece for me is, the example I'll give is a baseball cage, a softball batting cage that the city council wants to put at one of my schools. That doesn't align with a district priority, but there needs to be some sort of meeting of the minds at the beginning to kind of figure out what needs to happen on their part and what needs to happen on our part, so that we can get this done in a timely manner. So for example, at Baldwin, for example, when Councilmember Duval Carter set aside the funds to get this done, but there's just this, there's a breakdown between the district and the.
To me, that would align. I think of
Oh, okay.
student safety, and I don't see how that's not alignment. I see that as supporting the whole child. I mean, I could look at that from a whole lot of different ways. That's just me. I'm not the.
I can change
just didn't
priorities
want
to objectives. Encourage and support community partnerships in alignment with district objectives.
Oh, I like priorities better personally. I mean, it's a little bit detailed, but I think I'm okay with that. The only other thing that I would add is sometimes I think that the idea of community partnerships really lends to community organizations and not necessarily like our governmental partners as well. And so I do think that maybe there's space for that. And I know that it's work that we are doing. I just think that we can deepen is the word, or depth to the partnership.
Perhaps encourage and support community and government partnerships in alignment with district priorities.
I'm good with
Voila.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Just some, this is a question for us as a board. On the last bullets on the recommendations, some say continue to improve. And I'm afraid if we do put some of these, it seems as though it's not happening instead of continuing to have them. For example, build succession management is one, provide more training. Maybe the continued word, or continue to train, to build, to provide more training, continue to build. I don't know if it's needed for all the bullets, but
We need
I
something
wouldn't want somebody to
specific
just
there.
read this and think,
Yeah.
oh, they're not doing
Right.
anything with safety. They're not doing anything with any of these, so just a thought.
Provide more continued, improved perception. I like the idea of doing something to say either continue or refine.
What were we trying to continue there? Continue improvement of what? I almost feel like that's a general statement, we need to be more specific.
Which one?
Continue on the one you were talking about.
Succession management?
I like it the way it is, build succession management.
I think that there's some effort there. I think that we can continue to refine it, or, I mean, it exists. It's not particularly strong. Was there one in particular you were mentioning?
No, I disagree. I think instead of, I think continue, I agree, I'm just saying I agree with Board Member Vice Chair Willie.
So where did you want to add continue, Vice Chairman?
I just wanted to make sure the language is consistent. Like if we're saying continue on some of it, some of them may work. Like if we think continued improvement in student literacy and provide more training for mental health, does it give us a sense of where we are in it? Continued improvement means, all right, we're improving, we're continuing improving, but provide more training.
It says we have training, we want to provide more training.
Right.
Do we want to enhance training for mental health? Or-
Maybe that.
Enhance as opposed to more.
And I was just posing the question to make sure we were good on the language, because, as we said, because it could work. But also, we did mention mental health, and then we did the unconscious bias. I know I mentioned that, so if we could add that too.
Or,
Maybe
sustain.
diversity, or,
Unconscious bias, or is it
It's specifically unconscious
Cultural
bias,
awareness.
flat implicit?
but
Implicit.
We want to continue that or expand it, or what's the, and is it a?
I mean, we could just add it on to the back of provide more training for mental health and unconscious bias if this is the statement we're going with, which I think is fine.
Would you be comfortable with cultural awareness, which might include more than just unconscious bias?
Sure.
so I've revised the third bullet to say, provide more training for mental health and cultural awareness, period.
That's good.
Mhm.
Any other feedback?
Is this exactly how it will go out, or would somebody then take this and make it into, or would does this go out as is?
Through the chair to Vice Chairman Willie, I don't know if for a press release, if Dr. Pierce's office would, create some opening language, but this essentially is your statement for purposes of the board policy, and then it will travel with the combined evaluation to complete the file for 2019-2020. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
You printed it out.
For purposes of press releases and things like that, Dr. Pierce, if you want to get with board members for quotes, I'm happy to provide you with something, or if other board members want to share something, you can have some specific feedback for the press release, not for the HR file.
Right, so are we set? Do you wish to see the final corrected, or how would you like to proceed?
I trust that we've gone over the corrections publicly here. I'm comfortable with moving forward unless there is some concern. I do want to take some time to look at the strategic plan, and then we have an audit selection committee meeting we can have some conversation about. Dr. Green, did you want to share the strategic plan update goals? I'm gonna get there. We're still in governance. We're still in governance.
I need some water.
You should have the updated 21 to 2026 strategic plan goals. We basically kept goal 1, goal 2 the same, but goal 3 was divided into 2 goals, 3 and 4. DCPS will improve the post-secondary readiness of graduates by increasing the percentage of students earning soft skill credentials from X in August 2023 to Y by August 2026. This is a goal that we will have to develop what that looks like, and feel like that should be completely in place by 2023 at the beginning of the, it would, I may have eyes rolling at me, but the beginning of the 22-23 school year.
I love your ambition.
So goal 4, DCPS Career Technical Education, CTE programs will be recognized as high performing, with the percentage of programs becoming novice or moving from one performance level to the next, advanced, master, or national model increasing from X in July 2021 to Y in 2026. So under goal 4, we have 3 sub-goals. The percent of CTE program students identified as program completers will increase from X in July 2021 to Y in July 2026. Sub-goal 4.2, the percent of high school CTE program students passing industry certification and or license assessment will increase from X in July 2021 to Y in August of 2026. And the last one, the percent of high school CTE program students successfully completing a first year CTE course with a grade of C or higher will increase from X to Y. Those were the new sub-goals added under goal 4.
Are you looking for just approval,
Yeah.
Dr. Green?
Yes.
Okay.
Your
Is everyone satisfied with the progress measures and goal language here? Just for clarity purposes, has this has been posted for public hearing? So
Ms. Young.
changes would need to come as an amendment to the posting.
To the board through the chair, in order to meet the March deadline, we did have to post the policy language. So not the document with the goals, but the actual policy language. And you've received 2 versions, a version A and a version B. We consulted with Ms. Chastain, and if there are any changes, we would be able to stay on schedule by submitting just a change to the daily record of the change.
Yeah. I just have one.
Ms. Pearson?
I don't think credentials has an E in it.
Right.
In goal 3. I just Googled it to make sure.
Doesn't.
Okay. Hmm?
In the policy, it's not aired. I'm looking at these policies and I'm having a hard time seeing the differences in the versions. If there's no other comments on these goals, did you want to move to the guiding principles, or should we look at the policies?
We can move to the policies. Policy.
Do we know what the difference is in the versions? I'm just not seeing them.
Yes, because I think I have the same copy.
So there are no changes to the Section 2 of the policy. The guiding principles are identical. If you look at the version titled A, and I did mark them A and B, the version titled A is generic. So if you look, for example, and compare goals 1B, which is goal 2, regarding the performance of schools, district-operated schools earning A, B, or C. Version A simply says that the rate will increase from the year 2019 to 2026. Version B says that the rate increase will be from 86.10% to 96%. So that detail is in version B. In speaking with Ms. Chastain, we noticed version A because that is typically the way that the district notices its policies without including specific data. However, that is not consistent with what our facilitator has recommended. And so if you'll recall, AJ recommended that we include the detail. So we presented both versions for the board to decide which version it would like to move forward.
Thank you. So A does not have percentages, B has percentages. Just for some consensus, can we take a quick poll here? Percentages included or not included? Version A is not included, version B is included.
I would include it. Yeah.
Included. B, okay. Pearson?
I don't know.
I'll come back to you. Willie?
I would say no, unless we're gonna include all the other ones, which we don't have those numbers yet.
Okay. Joyce? A. Coker?
I agree with Darrell Willie.
A. And Hershey?
I agree with Vice Chair Hershey. Vice Chair Hershey. Vice Chair Willie. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Long day.
Need a snack over here. I need some more snacks.
We need more snacks over here.
Board Member Pearson, we always appreciate your input, but it doesn't matter at this point.
Ooh.
I mean, there are four votes for A. I didn't get input either, if that makes you feel any better. And so we'll go ahead and move forward with A, which is the noticed version. Were there changes to the guiding principles?
On the wrong page, I guess.
You were in here. We needed to be back here.
Oh.
You voted and didn't even change it.
Or any highlights that you wanted to point out, Dr. Green?
The guiding principles are exactly the same from the last
Thank you.
meeting and the meeting before that.
Ms. Young, did you have anything further on the strategic plan for us?
No, ma'am, just to clarify, Dr. Green is exactly correct. The guiding principles, the language did change in its written form, but you all went over those changes. AJ captured those at the last meeting. So they were just pointed out just to confirm. So for example, where you added to guiding principle 2 and communicate quarterly regarding the sales surtax, and where you added a line to the board's goals on guiding principle 3.
Yes, ma'am, Board Member Coker.
Through the chair, and maybe to Ms. Young, because you've been helping us so much with the superintendent evaluation. At this point, for the superintendent's evaluation for the instrument itself, we just need to make sure we have all the numbers filled in. And I know we needed to get through this piece of the puzzle before we could do that. But if you could help us get to that point, that would be great. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for all your help.
Thank you. All right, we are in governance. That is still the sort of place where we are living. And so if members have other items that they'd like to discuss in governance, we can do that at this time. And then there are sandwiches and we can kind of discuss what the afternoon will look like. Are there any other items for governance? Board Member Joyce.
Yes, I wanted to bring up the name change process. I am obviously, we know this is a very sensitive subject and there's a lot of community questions, and I'm getting a ton of them because the most controversial school is in my district. So there is just some and this might just need to, this might be a little too long for governance, but there's still some real questions about community meetings. Oh, I'm going to go through them so you don't have to answer them all right away. Community meetings, who's going to be able to speak at the community meetings, roster verification, balloting, the balloting process itself, how does that work? What kind of identification do you have to show? I think there's some concern about bringing your diploma or your yearbook that, somehow there's questions around this. I just want to be able to answer them. The counting of the votes, is it going to be at a SAC meeting where it's open to the public? And so those are some of the questions. I have some questions about speaker cards. And a speaker card, when you speak at a city council meeting, for example, you have to say, your address. I think there's some desire from the community to, when you speak, what kind of stakeholder are you? Do you live in the attendance area? They kind of want to know, who the stakeholder is that is speaking. Or if you're not I'm not a stakeholder, I just want to give you my opinion. So I think that needs to be some conversation around that speaker card. And then just, and I know that I shared with you yesterday about the SAC roster, the minutes and the agendas, and just preferring them not somewhere, a physical copy of those, so we can share those with the public if we knew they are public record.
Thank you, Board Member Joyce, for bringing this conversation around. And I can't recall, I know that there's been a couple of emails that have gone back and forth. And so in the interest of time today and maybe not being prepared to answer all of these questions at this moment, I know that there are some plans to roll out some of this communications. Is there an update on when we might be able to get some of these answers?
We will put the answers, whether you want them in an email, we will make sure that information is addressed before the end of the week.
Okay.
And I just want to make another comment that when you look at the tracker page, I guess there's been some conversation around identifying the names on the ballot. Those are due by February 12th, which is according to the website, which is obviously before the community meetings. And I think it was indicated in the somewhere that the names that were going to go on the ballot would be determined at the end of the community meeting. So I just need some clarification about that piece as well.
Any other items for governance? Jones first and then Coker.
Okay. I just thought that since we have two new board members, that would be timely and helpful if we revisit the concurrency or lack thereof, because there are a number of housing developments, apartments going up throughout this county, and that certainly will impact student attendance, enrollment, and so I thought it would be good that before we have the meeting with our normal annual joint meeting with the city council, that would be good to refresh all of us on the concurrency and the lack thereof.
You bring up an interesting statement, our annual joint meeting with the city council. I do intend to reach out to President Hazoria. I've actually given him a phone call. We haven't taken the sort of official city lines, but I do hope that we are able to have a meeting with the city council later in the spring. I'm aiming for perhaps April. And if we can get that coordinated, I think there are a lot of items that we can review with the council, including the half-penny referendum, joint use, joint planning, lots of things. So that may be something that we can make sure that the new board members are caught up on what concurrency is and how we collaborate.
And the chairman of the Joint Planning Committee, T.R. Hainline, is still waiting on some direction from the two political bodies on which direction that the two bodies would like to see the Joint Planning Committee take in addressing growth in our school district, how you pay for that.
Okay. Board Member Coker.
So a couple of quick items. One, wanted to follow up on the substitute data that was sent out. And looking at it, certainly we have schools that are sitting at 36%, 40% fill rate each day. Ed White sitting at a 51% fill rate, last year 94%, or and schools like Rains that are at 64%. But if you look at how many teachers have been asked to cover classes, it's 1,390. I keep hearing this resounding from teachers and whatnot about this issue. And to Dr. Green's credit, she's even gone in and subbed and all that, and I appreciate that. The item that we received had a list of various strategies that are being used. Just wanting to see if we could get some follow-up on a couple of items. One said that there were subs or permanent sub positions, and I know we've used that as a strategy in the past at certain schools, what the threshold is for that. And then just in the end, if those strategies aren't working, what are we going to do moving forward? How are we monitoring? Are we going to have Mr. Pierce do a campaign for retired teachers who've had their COVID shot? I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I mean, these numbers are hard, and I don't know how much, how long can our teachers continue to do what they're doing? And so how are we going to continue to monitor this, and do we have some other thoughts moving forward? And also, does any of this have to do with the company managing it or not? I don't know those things, so I ask those questions. A good bit of conversation about small group instruction. Can we get a better understanding in a time of COVID? And these are teachers that have worked with me, that I know they're solid. They've been with this district forever, and they want to do good and right, but they are genuinely scared of doing the small group instruction in the manner that we have traditionally expected it. So have we sent out any kind of proviso or Duval County recommendation that matches CDC guidelines or whatever of how to do small group instruction and still keep it safe? Small group instruction, I know, is necessary, but how do we do that? And teachers, because it's referenced in 2C and 3E in the CAST rubric, these are good teachers who want to get highly effective. They want to do right. So how are we handling that item? And then finally, I was not here for the SREF presentation, and so I apologize. This would have been asked then. Is there any way that we can have Paul come back to us and give us, for the non-safety SREF items, and I've actually gone and had fun reading SREF. Thank goodness Mr. Suarez does his job and we don't all have to read it. But SREF calls for things like textbook storage, reading room stacks. And I say textbook storage as we're doing a 10 million adoption for a series that's going to be digital. Do we need textbook storage? Media production laboratory, I remember how we used to use that, but you don't really do that anymore. Copying rooms when we have print release printers, periodical storage. We do that digitally now. So can we in some way use, what I don't want is we're building schools to these standards that meet what a school needed to be 20 years ago, when we're trying to build schools for 20 years from now. I asked my daughter when I was reading the stacks reference in here, and I said, when you were in high school in Duval County, did you ever check out a book from the media center? And she said, not once. Everything's online. So again, I don't know that we're held to these items, and again, these are the non-safety items, or we are, but could we get some follow-up on that as well?
Do we have any? Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Any other governance items?
I have a quick one.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, really quick. I know that all of us have been involved in various outside community meetings and whatnot. I just wonder, I've had this question for a while, just what is our sort of legal obligation or stance when it comes to virtually attending phone conferences, web conferences, not just as this board, but even as we're interacting and with our community. It came up at the oversight because some of them may not have been able to be there. I know it comes up for us. It's come up because I know I've sat in on city council meetings that are hybrid version. So I'm just wondering how we go about it. We're in this age of COVID. We want to keep everybody safe. We still want them to engage. I don't want us to have all options. So I just wonder what legally we have, what technology capabilities we have, sort of that conversation, because I don't think it's going to end anytime. I just want to kind of get some clarity on it. It doesn't have to be now, but I just want to make sure we talk about it.
I don't know when we would talk about it, if not now.
Oh.
Ms. Chastain, did you have any comments?
Sure. Through the chair to Vice Chairman Willie, and it's going to depend on the facts, like what meeting is it? But we're back to pre-emergency orders. So, because for a while, government agencies, local government agencies could meet purely virtually, but that was pursuant to the emergency orders issued by the governor's office. That ended sometime last fall, perhaps October 31, I don't remember. So where we are now is for the school board, for example, or any body that meets in the sunshine, you need a quorum of the board physically present. If the matter is if there's going to be any votes or any official action taken. If you don't have a quorum physically present, you can't vote non-present members in, nor could you vote on something in front of you. Our board's policy says you need a quorum present to vote in, so we've applied that to workshops and things like that where decisions are not made. To the oversight committee, we put in policy 9.66 that if a quorum is physically present, because that's through an attorney general opinion, they can vote in absent members and things like that. But in any regard, there has to be physical access for the public to come and watch. We don't have the ability legally to do any type of purely remote participation. We still have to provide public comment and things like that because pursuant to those statutes. So depending on, sometimes city council is holding something and they're inviting you. That requires coordination with the board office and myself to understand logistically what's going on so that we can determine how to notice it, if we have to notice it, and put you in the proper position so that you can participate versus merely attending as a member of the public. So I have a very long-winded answer because I'm trying to think of the million types of variations that might be, but I think the first answer is let's make sure we understand exactly what's being proposed, and we'll put you in the right posture.
And then I think the second part of that question really is, especially when you're thinking about somebody or a committee like the Oversight Committee, it's where they're going to meet. What will be the home, and then what is the IT capacity of that space? And I would imagine that is part of what we face here as we try to, live in this new world. We are in a building that may have limitations for, the most 21st century way of doing work, which I think is part of the conversation about, moving this space. And so kind of, are you interested in talking about expanding the IT capacity?
But potentially, but also just thinking about all the other subsequent things. I know because I have at least 2, 3, 4 different community meetings too for the school name changes, and there are folks who are afraid to go in person, but they would love to participate. And I just want us to be able to have either a statement and understand like where that's coming from, because that came up a lot of times. Why can't we be there not in person? It's COVID. We're telling people not to gather now. So I think there's questions around that too, not just from us meeting, but also as we engage the community in this environment. What options are we going to have, and how do we communicate that? How do we just make sure we're communicating that?
Ms. Chastain, do you have concerns about how to move forward with virtual access to things like community meetings for renaming?
To the chairman, yes, I would want to be mindful that I'm trying to balance as much access as possible, but still run the meetings like the meetings need to be implemented. We're in a state where the governor, we're where we are. We need to meet in person. We don't have the same latitude that we had before to only meet virtually, but I want to let me think that through. I want to balance how to create as many access points. That's language that the statutes use, as many access points as possible for feedback, whether it's creating an email address or something like that. Let me think that through and speak with the district for that, because I do understand the concern. I do. I just need to balance that with where we are.
Yep, thank you.
Appreciate that. I have a couple other items that are not urgent, so I'm going to wait and we can have some conversation at our next meeting. But I do want to share with you these books that are sitting here before we wrap up. These are from, I don't want to mess up her name. What's her? Taylor, what is the last name?
Richardson.
Richardson, thank you. These are from Taylor Richardson. She is, I think we've got, what, 3 this way? Oh, I think I have one here too. Thank you. 3, that's not what I'm saying. She's a student actually at Bowles. She read this book, was really inspired, and she feels like it's something that other young people and other leaders that work with young people should be exposed to. And so she created a GoFundMe for the Black Friend Challenge that she's put out on social media and Twitter. And so she tagged me a couple times in some things, and then they used the funds from the GoFundMe campaign to purchase books for all of us and the superintendent. I will say, she's provided me some kind words and some a statement on why this is important to her that I'm going to share at our March 2nd meeting. But if you have a time to crack the book between now and then and want to share anything about it, then I wanted you to have the book today. I got it yesterday in the mail. Enjoy. Happy reading. And then if you want to tweet or Facebook about hashtag the Black Friend Challenge, then feel free to do that.
Can we get her information to send thank you notes?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are at the end of our workshop and governance. We really do need to have this audit selection committee meeting because we put it off. It's already been delayed a month. How are you all feeling? I know Vice Chairman Willie needs to go.
You know, I need to eat.
Right, there is a sandwich, so we are going to get a sandwich either way. Are we okay with having a sandwich while Ms. Blades presents our slides?
10-15 minute break and then.
Can we adjourn this?
Yes.
And
Absolutely. Okay. If we are all amenable to going ahead and grabbing some lunch and then having Ms. Blades present, why don't we go ahead? We'll adjourn now and take 10 minutes.
1:15.
Do we need 15 minutes?
That's
We'll go with 15 minutes. 1:15. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. We are motion and seconded.
Wow.
We'll go with Joyce and Hershey on that. We are adjourned.
I feel like I was having an out-of-body experience. Right. I was like, I don't even know where I came from, but I ended up here and checked out.
Oh my gosh, that was so cute.
Well, I know, and I want to be
What if you do 15
fair.
out of 20?
Yeah, we should be fair.
Don't let me get in your way.
Right.
hit the gavel and say, "Where's everybody?"
All right, I'm going to get, okay.
Like that time, so festive. Really?
I'm just gonna move. Been sitting too long. Oh my God.
I bet you're gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. It's light, and I bet you're.
I feel so stupid because I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. I'm trying to get the answer.
I thought that was pretty, that was right when I was moving here.
They did it twice.
Oh, yes, that is right. First time they did it. I think about you all the time. Like, 'cause I'm getting another chance.
superintendent gave it to us for Christmas.
I didn't get one of those. Huh?
I gotta see you too.
I did not get one.
Oh, you said, okay, too.
No, we didn't get them up with
Yeah, these two members.
Lunch is so tall
But
today.
he wanted to see if I was
Only two girls.
there was no problem at the beginning,
Maybe.
while the meeting was taking place, I was so stressed out. He ordered me the food.
I don't remember.
I didn't like,
She's like, you
It's
cannot.
going to because.
I sent both of them, well, everybody has, all of the documentation that I'm gonna talk about today, so if you can't, maybe if you
Can we do a, we can
listening
do a go-to
through a
meeting?
fast food intercom.
I know.
part of the meeting is
Uh-huh,
documented,
yeah.
and it's preferred that that's done in person.
Okay.
I mean, if there's a situation where.
Oh, my fault.
I'm going this way.
But how much of that is it? That's just part of it?
You know, Gail,
Product is probably takes about,
I don't know why they are calling this the auditor's selection.
What's that something?
You know, I just.
but, the other part is.
It was just copied from all the previous.
I have a feeling that now that we've selected our auditor,
On
they're
areas,
supposed to be called auditors.
might have that might not be covered.
The documents were great.
I'll find out.
That's something that they would find out, 'cause I have a feeling they're being misnamed.
It probably is.
Assessed,
Okay.
that was assessment.
Okay.
Like transportation's on there, safety's on there, yeah.
A lot of questions.
So if I could just, if you guys could get back with me, and, I'm trying to, the timeline that I have today, that I'm gonna discuss, cause I wanna be done with the comprehensive risk assessment by the end of this month. So,
Let's
if
do,
you
let's
could,
do this next week.
you wanna give me a date and time?
No, that's actually better for me.
Okay.
It's better for me, because
Okay.
that's actually, I can get my family.
Oh crap, I don't have mine, but I will move, anybody else I have scheduled to get here.
Thursday morning, the 18th.
The 18th, I think that's fine. What time?
Let's do like 8:30, 9? What time do you get here? What? Let's do early. I like early. You tell me the earliest time and I'll do that.
I'm flexible to your schedule.
Well, the building's gotta be open, so I mean, what, 7?
The building is usually open like at 6 or whatever. Now, I'm
Right,
not
right,
here
right,
at
right.
6, but
Let's do 8.
8, okay.
When you
I
get,
will send you it.
that's what I was gonna say, when you get back to your office, send me an invite. I'm sorry about that too. I meant to, I kept looking at it and then going back to my calendar and not actually deciding.
Okay.
Thanks for your work. How you been? Pretty good?
Yeah, about yourself?
You playing any tennis?
Yes and no.
What does that mean? How's that possible? Yes.
I've only had one match this year.
What? That's it? That's, no.
Yeah, but the rain, the weather was pretty good.
know that you've been working on this, and I'm actually going to run up and get a Coke Zero.
I am really hungry today.
Turn right back around and do it again.
Right. you get that?
In the cafeteria.
Oh, you went upstairs?
Would you like some? I can get a cup, probably.
We've got cups in the kitchenette. I think when we got on the board, they stocked the refrigerator upstairs with drinks for us. Well, y'all still do that, Lisa?
I just like to know exactly what it is.
No.
Yeah.
When we got on the board.
Is Inglewood in your district?
Inglewood is.
Elementary? And that supposed to be closed?
No, it's actually gonna get students from some.
Matt,
Did you go to walk-on charities, the kickoff, the game?
Saturday?
No, last night, Wolfson beat Inglewood.
Oh, no.
Yes, I do. 'Cause I think sometimes I
Why do you ask about Inglewood Elementary?
Hmm?
Why do you ask about Inglewood?
Matt, come do you text me that if it's gonna be closed?
And I think Cindy seems to be too.
I do like hot tea, but I had some this morning, and if I drink some more, Charlotte will have to keep me in my chair.
Yeah, well, that's why we kind of quit drinking, making coffee. I mean, you don't care for the coffee down here. We make yours upstairs if you decide.
I'll send something to you,
And then,
I'll send this to you.
trying to think who else is the coffee.
Here's the one pager for Inglewood.
No, we what?
They have a
Oh.
$14
They spoil you.
new construction.
Whatever.
But I'll send this to you and you
We
can
got
send it on to
Dunkin'
the person.
Oh, yes, that's my favorite.
And if you decide you want one, let me know. I'll
Apparently
check it
somebody's
out.
going around saying it's gonna be closed.
Thank you.
I went through this with your principal.
Y'all are funny.
They're actually gonna get students from lunch.
But if y'all ever show up at my church,
I have to, I'm
Information that Paul went over today, I thought it might have been there.
Yeah, it's the students within the Love Grove district will have new boundaries designating them to the newly built Inglewood Elementary School or the newly built Spring Park Elementary School. So it's the opposite of what people are saying.
okay.
Cause that really, I was really freaked out
But the
Friday.
informal is not
His wife Karen went to
anything,
Inglewood
right?
Elementary.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
Well,
No,
it's a conversation privately. There's no board,
But we met summatively to make, we did.
and, oh, did you? 'Cause I don't
Yeah, you
remember
do have
that
to meet.
board policy.
We did that with you, yeah.
Okay, well, let's do this. You may need to educate us a little bit more, because I understood something different. Next week, we're trying to notice the meeting. Charlotte, did you have a date?
I left my calendar at home.
You want me to call you? I'll call you.
Yeah.
No.
Inglewood
So I'll call
Inglewood
it.
Elementary will be torn down
We're,
and replaced.
I think
That
Monday
is
is
true.
President's Day, we're
Both
closed
high
at the
school and
district
the
open.
elementary.
Just
other
elementary,
than
I'll send
that-
you the page for the high school.
Yeah, no, we did, again, the
It's,
social
um,
manual, and I need to document that it happened, right? That there's a summative, so what does that look like, you know,
Yeah, but would you
at
have?
the board level?
We can find it.
We met in a workshop. and
Yeah, I'll send you the
had
whole
a-
website.
And talk through it.
This is what I use for my school visits.
So,
So,
See, I didn't see that in board policy.
It has every school.
How about next
Yeah,
week?
And you can
yeah.
just touch on a school.
yeah, and then, you know, do I have the right
You
instrument
definitely, you
for,
I've got more.
which I think is simply creating 7 forms
Been
now,
trying to
right?
count the number of
Updating
schools that
matrix.
are closing in Memphis.
And then whatever goals you set.
Well, when I did my school benefit, my school visit.
Correct, whatever
I
goals,
printed out
right.
this
But I
page for
can-
every school that I went to and reviewed it with the principal.
In a good way. No,
I know.
you're already there.
It's fun.
You know,
Yeah.
Ready?
it's all about it.
need another minute?
Excuse me, sorry, Sharon.
The school board of the Duval County School District is now convened in its auditor selection committee meeting. The CDC currently recommends that facial coverings are worn while in public. Therefore, we recommend that all attendees wear a facial covering during today's meeting. Thank you for taking the time to join us and for your interest in the operation of the Duval County School District. You're good over there. I forgot to ask. All right, we are going to have our internal board auditor, Ms. Lena Blades, join us this afternoon to give us some updates. Ms. Blades, whenever you are ready, we are gonna have our working lunch, but
Okay.
do you have your clicker and your presentation and everything?
I wasn't sure how that whole thing worked, so did y'all pass out the folders? The manila folders?
I don't have anything.
No. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. I know I bit into that Susie bite and I forgot to how to get a napkin. So my face mask is for.
I brought snacks.
The lemon pound
No.
cake.
I stopped and got snacks on the way in.
There's snacks back. Did you ever get out of the basket?
Funky.
Let the board office know. Yes. Welcome to being a board member.
I have more snacks in my backpack, but I was just going to, I think, I don't have my endurance.
Whenever you're ready, Ms. Blazes, you'll just make sure your microphone is on. And if you're comfortable there, that's fine, or you can move up or wherever you want to be. I don't know if they work differently or.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good afternoon, board. It's my understanding that there are 3 areas I think that we're supposed to discuss during this auditor selection committee meeting. You might hear me going forward, call it ASC. But we're gonna talk about first the sales surtax oversight considerations. Then we're gonna go into the status of the comprehensive risk assessment. That is the information that you have in your manila folder, separated by the binder clip. And then I think we might be doing something related to the evaluation, but that's not really
We'll have a brief discussion related
What
to the
I'm-
evaluation.
talking about. All right. So, just to give a brief background as to how we got here, if you flip to the second page, with the title of Chronology of Events, the board expressed interest in additional oversight of the sales surtax referendum at one of the meetings, and during that meeting, there was a discussion about the additional services clause that we have with our external auditor, MSL. I reached out to, IBA is me on this list, internal board auditor. I reached out to MSL to discuss some possible engagement. IBA consulted with Palm Beach DSB because of experience with referendums. Based on consultation, IBA contacted CRI to discuss possible engagement. So the details of this timeline is what we'll go over today. Some additional background is some relevant, regularly scheduled audits that the district already undergoes. We have the annual financial audits that are conducted by MSL, our external auditor, as well as the Auditor General, who audits on a 3-year cycle. Our next audit is due for fiscal year 2022. Then we have the operational audits. The Auditor General generally audits us on a 3-year cycle. And again, the next upcoming audit is fiscal year 2022. And then myself, the internal board auditor, we'll discuss a little later about the comprehensive risk assessment. So I put myself there, should this topic be selected as an area of review. And we flip to the next page. Just an overview again with some of the information included in this document are some suggested sales surtax referendum monitoring. So the categories will be the sales surtax referendum compliance. In the spreadsheet, in the packet here, it'll be referred to as referendum compliance, some construction contract compliance, and then the sales surtax oversight committee compliance, which will be termed oversight committee compliance. We flip to the next page. We have the MSL discussion notes related to the referendum compliance. There were several areas that we discussed when I reached out to MSL. So if you look at attachment A, included in your packet are the details of those discussion notes. When I reached out to them and asked if they had experience with performing any oversight or audits of anything related to the referendum, they indicated that they have not had any engagements in this area, but certainly that we could come up with something if that was the board's desire. And they said in their experience, internal audit usually handle things in this nature. So some possible areas that we discussed, they said accounting, we could determine or ask, were the revenues expenditures accounted for in a separate fund? Were revenue collections valid and complete? Were expenditures allowable per the referendum? In the procurement area, were board policies and procedures followed? Was the bidding process performed as necessary? Were evaluations and selections appropriate? Under the area of contract management, were contract terms adhered to? Were deliverables received? And then when we spoke about how much those services would cost, they said an upfront cost estimate can be provided if based only on the number of transactions to be reviewed, and they'll have a better idea once money is actually spent related to the referendum. So after that conversation with them saying, they really didn't have anything already created that they do in this area, I thought about at a previous or a prior continuing professional education, I'm losing my train of thought.
Your own training?
Training, yes. Conference, that's the word that I was looking for. At one of the presenters there, she spoke about referendums because her district had done several referendums. And so I thought, and she was from Palm Beach, and so I was like, well, I'll reach out to her to see if she has any knowledge, experience, guidance in this area, and how they proceeded, if they have some sort of oversight in their area. So that is, I reached out to Leanne Evans at Palm Beach. She's the treasurer. And it's on the next page where it says discussion notes with treasurer of Palm Beach DSB. The treasurer indicated they provide their district's independent sales surtax oversight committee, ISOC for short, with applicable sales tax, financial, and project budget reports at each ISOC meeting held. The treasurer agreed that their district's internal audit department performs many of the procedures discussed in the previous MSL, attachment A slide. It's not a slide, though, sorry. IBA, myself, I then inquired about whether there was anything else the treasurer wished her district would have done or done differently in hindsight. She provided that she would have liked for her district to have incorporated procuring services related to the audit of their construction contractors, as some other districts have done. She then proceeded to discuss CRI, which their name is Carr, Riggs, and Ingram, and the work they perform. We flip to the next page. So I reached out to Carr, Riggs, and Ingram, and if you look at attachment B, Per the discussion, after I had the discussion with them with what we were kind of looking for and what their experience was in the areas related to construction contractor oversight, they provided this write-up, if you will, which is attachment B. I'm not gonna go through each of the, I guess, references, if you will, that they provided, but just the general overview, I've also emailed all of these documents, so if you lose these documents or anything else, they should be also in your email. So in their write-up, they mentioned that they have extensive experience in construction cost avoidance services spanning 700 plus projects over 25 plus years. They do have experience with various Florida school districts. They're currently contracted with Broward, Orange, Osceola, Volusia, and Seminole District School Boards, to name a few. Turn to the next page. As a general overview, they said they potentially, some services in this area that they perform for their clients are contract reviews, guaranteed maximum price reviews, or GMP, payment application services, and closeout services. They did indicate that closeout services is where the most of their work is related to those clients that I had mentioned previously. So we turn to the next slide. And you can also have out attachment C. I'm gonna discuss that. But the contract review is in the initial phase of work. So they say CRI reviews the project's contract documents for language relative to the finances of the project. Utilizing best practice language gleaned from hundreds of projects performed, CRI makes recommendations to modify the contract language. This review covers a wide array of topics that includes, but is not limited to, labor burden, cost of work clause, general conditions, general requirements, insurances, and subcontractor overhead and profit. Recommendations to the contract on the front end can help you avoid significant costs. And there is residual value because recommendations can be implemented into future contracts. So they then provided, if you look at attachment C, a timeline and the project approach for contract review services. And they also provided an example of what a construction contract review would look like. So if you look in the examples, you'll see on the left margin what the original contract said, and then on the right margin, you'll see what recommendations they made to revise the contract. If we flip to the next page in the slide, they discussed GMP review as a service, and that's also in the initial phase work. CRI reviews the components of the guaranteed maximum price and performs verification testing before the project begins to avoid excessive or improper charges. Areas of testing would include, but not be limited to, general conditions, labor rates, labor burden, general liability insurance, and subcontractor default insurance. So if you'll see on attachment D, they also provided a timeline and a project approach for a guaranteed maximum price review. Now, I will point out that at this point, I'm not exactly sure which contract type the district will utilize in going forward with the construction contractor. But GMP is one type of construction contract that could be implemented. Next, if we flip to the next page in the slide, we are the payment application services. That work will be performed in an interim phase work. It's a review of a sample or all payment applications for evidence of complete documentation, compliance with charges to the contract documents, proper categorization of general conditions, general requirements, and cost of the work items. I didn't provide, and they didn't provide either additional detail, because if If you remember in the beginning when we were talking about some general work that the internal board auditor could perform, I felt that this was an area that if we needed to get additional work or oversight, we could implement this, but I don't think that this would necessarily be something that we would want to contract with them to do, because it is something that I can perform. If we flip to the next page, again, this is where the bulk of their work is, and it's related to the closeout services, and this is the final phase of work. CRI performs comprehensive verification procedures on the final job cost detail for the project, as presented by the construction manager from its job costing accounting system. Services center predominantly around the construction manager's records for the project. Their, I'm sorry, I think I might have a, sorry. Completion of this is about 3 to 4 weeks, assuming no major issues. There's a menu of procedures developed from years of performing these services, but there is also collaboration with each client to allow them to choose or refine the procedures that will provide them the most value. And so the menu of those procedures is what's shown in attachment E. We flip to our next page. The cost. The estimate for closeout services is usually around 0.1% of the construction contract. For example, projects that are 10 million, it will cost about $11,000 to $12,000 for them to perform the closeout services work. Projects that are around 20 million will be around 20,000. Projects around 40 million will be about 30,000, just so you can have an idea of what it would cost us to procure their services related to closeout services. Their estimate for contract or GMP reviews, which were the ones that I mentioned and labeled them as the initial phase work before you actually got into the construction part, they can range between $8,000 to $12,000. And again, the timeline is on the attachments when they said how long it would take and what the project procedures. If we flip to the next page, oh, sorry. The last area where we could, before I go forward, I did run this information past district staff, and they agreed that these could be some services of value. Okay, and so then the last area I'm going to talk about is related to the Oversight Committee compliance. And the district has implemented procedures to ensure compliance with Board Policy 9.66, the Sales Surtax Oversight Committee. So if you look at attachment F, that's our policy. And I've highlighted within the policy the areas, should we want these areas to be monitored. I just kind of wanted you to know where in the policy it said these things. So if I were to look at it, it'd be something along the lines of, were meeting updates provided as required? Was the annual report submitted? Was membership accurate? Were members eligible? Were term limits adhered to? Were meetings held at least quarterly and in compliance with Florida's Sunshine and Public Records laws? So that is what I have to present related to the question about possible oversight, additional oversight related to the referendum. So if you all had any, going forward, we can have a discussion about next steps.
Thank you, Ms. Blades. Excuse me. I asked Ms. Blades to look into this further and make sure that we had some information. I know that this is something that I've heard come up from the board on a couple of different occasions. And so as she has presented sort of her investigation work to you all, maybe there's a good opportunity for us to kind of share what your thoughts are around the idea of additional oversight. Does anybody have input or feedback?
Madam Chairman, I think it's excellent. I just don't know if what's the total cost of that oversight, but it's another layer, and it gives assurances to the oversight committee, which in turn lets the community know that we are doing things transparently, professionally, and meeting the budget. I think the biggest concern that I have with the construction is the change orders and how that can severely impact projects going forward. So if they're reviewing those prior to them going out, I think is a very valuable process to have in place.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. Other thoughts? Ms. Pearson? Board Member Pearson?
Yes, I'm going to put this back on. Thank you, Ms. Blades, for all the work that you've done and for putting together a thorough packet. I will read through it later to get all the details. But just the one question that popped up in my head is any of this redundant with things that that we would already have in place through purchasing, or would this be on top of what our purchasing department or any other district staff tasked in this realm would be doing, including yourself?
So, as I mentioned, some of the areas when in my discussion with MSL and in my presentation about CRI services related to the interim work, which they call payment application services, things of that nature, I could and will look at should you all select, when we go through the comprehensive risk, should you all select that as an area that I would look at. So yes, that is something that I could do, and I'm not necessarily saying that will be what we would ask them to do.
Mm-hmm.
The district does, as you all are aware, they have a contract with for staff augmentation, Jacobs. They have an agreement with Jacobs, and I'm not exactly sure all of what's included in their software and what they look at, but some of the concern from the board was they wanted additional oversight. And so that's why I thought that I would bring in this additional information to supplement, if you will, what the district already has in place.
So to follow up, it sounds like we might not know exactly what we need until we know what our project manager that we're hiring provides, or?
This would be, again, because the wish was additional oversight. So this is the district, and this is someone providing oversight to what the district is already doing.
Mr. Suarez, do you have additional commentary?
Through the chair to Ms. Pierce, we have Jacobs, and Jacobs, as Ms. Blaze mentions, has a staff augmentation. So instead of us hiring a project manager, they're going to bring a project manager in, run it. They're going to have a deputy director. It's all going to be under our executive director. So it's really like a staff function. Every 3 years, the state comes in and fully audits everything. They go through all the records, all that, make sure all costs are allowable, make sure all things are done correctly. Essentially what this firm would do is an interim function like that. They would come in, and the preference would be, if we're going to have this type of support, to have it during the action. Like when we go through we have 4 major construction projects, which are going to be GMP, Pearson, Southside Estates, the new 6-8 coming, those large projects. Having a firm like this working with us as the GMP comes in, helping us screen it, go through it, make sure costs are allowable, having them go through the first major payroll processes in that first year could be valuable. And then they could drop back to a more of a closeout after that first or second year. And then you're gonna have the state come in and do it for real. So it's just an extra service to make sure things aren't missed. It'll be helpful in the first year as we're standing up the program. Assuming they're coming with all the experience of doing this at several other programs, as we go through it in a large program for the first time in several years. I hope that makes sense.
It does.
And when the state comes in, they won't necessarily look at every project and every detail. It's more on a sample basis, usually based on materiality.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback, Mr. Suarez. Yes, Board Member Coker.
Want to echo the thank you for the effort and the work on this item. I have been one of the ones that have concern. mainly because having just run an election and meeting with so many people, they're excited that the referendum's going, but they don't have complete faith that we're going to be able to administer it without any issues. And certainly having been a part of the audits from the state myself, I recognize what Mr. Suarez says, which is they come every couple of years. And if we could do an audit of ourselves, and as Mr. Suarez said, kind of scale up so that when we get to that third year, it's as clean as possible, that's always a good thing. My question is certainly have concerns about cost, as Board Member Jones referenced, but when I read the materials over the weekend, I noted that, like, for an Orange County Oak Hill Elementary School, and maybe I'm not interpreting this correctly, so please correct me if I'm not, but Oak Hill, which is in Packet B, page 5. So Orange County Public Schools builds Oak Hill Elementary School. It's a $15 million project. The cost recovery as a result of what was done was $255,000. If we go to Osceola County, which is the next one, and they built Osceola New High School, it looks like. Total cost of that project was $57 million, and the cost recovery was $63,000. I thought this one was interesting. And Brevard, they must have really had their stuff going really well, because it was Cocoa High School, $2.6 million, and they only recovered $5,000. So my question, and there are a couple more illustrations that further, am I interpreting correctly that we get that money back, and that would in turn basically cover the cost of the investment of the 0.1%? Am I interpreting that correctly or not?
Yes.
I mean, I know that it would be a little bit of a gamble because they might not find any cost recovery. It may be like the $5,000 project and we didn't get as much, but it could be that it's like the one where they got
140.
200, yeah. And so I don't go to, I don't gamble, but anyway. My question is, do most districts find that this pays for itself in the recovery costs or not? And I don't know whether you or Mr. Suarez, I don't know who's the right person on that.
Just in my reaching
rolling
out
the
with Orange, and also speaking, again, Palm Beach didn't procure these services, and again, this is something that the treasurer always advocates for, but she gets shot down. I mean, so she's upset about it because that is one of the things she also says is like, it will pay for itself based on her communications with other districts and why they use them and how the name came about that she recommended them to me. So yes, it is a service that, I don't know if Mr. Soares has any additional input, but that was the selling point also that they made, that they can't guarantee it, but usually in the closeout procedure, that is when they usually are able to recover costs for the district, and so in essence, the cost recovery pays for their services, sometimes above and beyond.
And just one follow-up question to Mr. Suarez. So what I'm hearing, I continue to hear that we're going to bring these people in with the notion of, over the few years, be able to know that we're building the internal processes so that we're on our own. Do you see this as being something, I kind of heard that, I think I heard that you said that this could be helpful. Are you saying that? I mean, tell me where you are as the expert who's going to oversee all this.
Through the chair to Ms. Coker. I think that it is beneficial. We have processes in place because we're doing construction now. The difference is going to be the rate and the scale. You're going to go from 20 million to 150 million. You're going to see a different type of costs. You know, you're going to see, to run a $1 million plumbing job, it may be, you know, relatively small, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of expense. When you come in to do a $20 million construction project, now they're bringing in trailers, IT, communications, different rentals, different services they're going to want. It's not easy to go through that entire list and know which one's not allowable or allowable. I mean, you can figure it out, but you have to work at it. It's going to be new. I haven't done it for almost a decade since we built Atlantic Coast High School. So having a firm there right with you as a consultant, not after the fact looking at records, but during the process, would be helpful to go through. And after about, I feel pretty confident, after going through a year, maybe a little longer with this, the team we have is going to know, be much more skilled at it than they are now. And they can revert back to an end of project type service, and then the audit occurs and you go through everything.
And that is one of the selling points. They also pointed out that you could If, for example, they came in to look at a project and the language that they said you should use in a GMP or whatever it is, you can continue to use that language in your contracts going forward.
Board Member Hershey.
This is probably a question more through the chair to, I don't know, maybe Ms. Chastain, I don't know, or Ms. Blades. What would our next steps be for if we chose to move forward to engage or, you know, with a contract or MOU or whatever it is? It certainly sounds like from listening to the information that was presented and comments from both Board Member Jones and Dr. Coker is, you know, it underscores the fact from our conversation earlier today that we may need some revenue that we don't anticipate if in the event that schools were consolidated and we decided that, okay, we're going to consolidate these and there's a need to move. It's always fun and neat to be able to find money, particularly when we don't know the financial forecast for the next 5 to 10 years. It looked a whole lot different. It looks a lot different today than it did in 2019, pre-COVID. And also building costs or just lumber has just shot up. So my short question is what steps do we need to take to engage with this process?
So can I chime in first? So as a part of my discussions and research, if you will, I've kind of looked at if we could piggyback off of, as I mentioned, there are several districts that already use these services. And so the contract, I've gotten several of them in the contract that I like the most is the one that Broward is using. So I've already met with purchasing, and they've taken a look at the RFP, probably RFQ, I'm not sure, one of those, the bid documents, and as well as the contracts, and they indicated that it would be something that we would be able to piggyback off of now. Karen?
Ms. Chastain, if you have some guidance about, you know, how if the board was amenable to this, what would those next steps be, and where would your cautions or concerns come in legally?
My first question is, are we exact on what it is we're looking for? Because this is a lot of information, and when I work with a client, what are you trying to achieve? And I think when in the attachment A for MSL, that seems compliance audit oriented, with the exception is I didn't understand the bullet point where evaluations and selections appropriate. That sounded a little subjective to me. So at a baseline level, compliance auditing, it would be helpful if I understood when the Auditor General comes, what functions, what is the Auditor General looking at? And is that represented in attachment A, MSL, or is there more? So I'd want to understand that list. And then moving further on the various CRI proposals, I couldn't tell if there was any overlap. It seemed more aspirational and goal oriented, but I wasn't quite clear. When I see cost savings and things like that, or do you have the right contract language to get a better result financially, that sounds more goal and aspirational than what an auditor would look for, at least the way I understand the functions. So my question would be, what exactly are we looking for? And then, you know, another variable is the Jacobs contract is approved. What overlap, if any, is there? Or if there is overlap, are you aware of it, and is this intentional? So I have questions about scope. That's my first question. And then once that's defined, the practice is to go to procurement. Is there a contract to piggyback off of that another agency has already signed? My caution about that is you step into their shoes. If they terminate, we're terminated. You're not the master of your own contract.
Domain, yeah.
You're really relying on somebody else. So everyone likes gets drawn into the initial ease of piggybacking, but your fortunes rise and fall as the master contract does. Or is it something, how would procurement suggest we go about? and give us options. Can it be directly negotiated? Does it require competition? But you can't answer those questions until you know what it is that you're seeking to purchase. So very globally, maybe the baseline audit compliance, what is the Auditor General looking for so that our affairs, our files are in order, and then building on top of that, are there supplemental services, guidance as to best practices, cost savings, things like that. I think we've been presented, if I understand it correctly, a spectrum. And so where do you land? Do we already have some of that in place? I'm not sure. And then once you figure out the delta, go to procurement and find out what's our best path of getting these services. Does that make sense?
And so if, my understanding, and I'll come back to Board Member Hershey, as Ms. Blades has kind of laid this out for us, there's a couple different avenues where there are functions of auditing that are possible. And that typically internal board auditors will do some of this work. So when we're looking at these scopes of accounting, procurement, or contract management, CRI would really be coming in to consult and support the contract management specifically. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And so when we're looking at the accounting piece, then we are allowing MSL and the Auditor General to do those pieces in their regular work. And then you would also be supporting as the internal board auditor possibly in these areas as well?
Yes.
Okay. And so your recommendation would just be, based on the conversations you've had with the district, that this contract management piece would be the additional ancillary support piece that could be beneficial to the district?
Yes.
And in that case, Broward has a contract. We don't know the details of that, but potentially we could piggyback on it. So we would need to look closely at that. Otherwise, we would go to procurement and explore how to move forward with our own independent contract. Does that get you?
That's good clarification, because I think, I was hearing, let's do it, but then we have to understand what is the scope, to use Ms. Chastain's word, of that, and then so we can move forward and accomplish what we intend to.
And so as the board, when you're asking or you're wanting additional oversight, was there something more or any specific direction in addition to exploring this contract management piece where there looks like there is potential for some return on the investment here to save funding that you find particularly concerning or important? I mean, we can go to the Auditor General, past findings or historical findings and see what they think, but are there things that for you and for your reporting back to your community that you are particularly worried about when it comes to the oversight of the sales tax?
The word that comes to my mind is efficiency. Let's be as efficient as possible with the use of public funds.
I would think that falls under the contract management space.
I think so.
Unless somebody more knowledgeable than I has a different perspective. Okay. All right.
Can I ask one more?
Yes, Former Joyce.
So how will these audit findings be presented? Will they be presented to the obviously they'll be presented to us through you, but is this also something that will be presented to the sales oversight committee, Surtax oversight committee?
Yes, as a part of reporting, I would figure that would be something that we would also share with them. They would be a recipient of the report.
So, and I think that seems reasonable, right? If these are services that we would purchase at the district, Mr. Suarez and the superintendent feel will be beneficial, that they'll want to share that as an extra layer of added security to this oversight committee. Can we explore the Broward contract and then circle back around to the possibility of procurement? If it's okay with the board, I'll continue to do that work with Ms. Blades and Ms. Chastain and the district staff, and we can come back around to that at a later date. Excellent. All right, then moving on to the comprehensive risk assessment.
Can I just add
Oh.
some information about the Broward, just because I do have their contract and I've already been in discussions with purchasing, because there was some, conversation about timeline and being at Mercy. Their current contract is from January 1, 2020 through 6/30/22. And it has an option for 2 additional 1-year renewal periods. So I kind of just wanted to put that out there.
Did they compete that, or was it a direct negotiation? Was that the result of an RFP?
Yes,
Can you
it
tell?
was, I'm gonna get the RFP. That's all I wanted to add about that.
And I don't have a sense of whether or not that contract term length meets our needs, so that's something that we would have to continue to explore.
Through the chair, I think I heard through June 30th, 2022. Yes, with 2 one-year renewals. So it's a gamble. If they decide to make a change in 2022 and end that contract, anyone who piggybacks off of it also expires at the same time. So that would be your worst case scenario, or an immediate termination could be as well. Your best case scenario sounds like it's if all renewals are exercised through June 30th, 2024, which sounds like a long time from now, but it isn't.
And really the difference is just being able to engage those services quickly.
Okay, that's what I was.
Right, I mean, that's sort of what makes the difference for us.
And if I may, one more observation. There's no right or wrong answer. Sometimes it's just beneficial to get something going, to give you time to ascertain, is this the right fit, or give you time to solicit and get your permanent solution in place. I mean, I can't substitute my opinion for yours, but there is value sometimes to getting something quickly going to get you started.
And we are already working on contracting and things for Pearson, right? Yeah, so I mean, it is time sensitive. We are in a time sensitive space currently. Okay.
Sorry, one more thing, in case I didn't say it. Once you piggyback, that doesn't mean as long as Broward is open, you have to stay with it. You always have the opportunity to.
So we could move forward with piggybacking and then going ahead with our own
Correct.
Process for procurement.
Yes.
Okay. Comprehensive risk assessment, then, if you're ready, Ms. Blades.
The next area that I'm going to discuss is the comprehensive risk assessment status. Per the law and my charter, I'm required to perform a comprehensive risk assessment of all areas of the school system every 5 years, although an analysis of risk will be performed annually to determine whether there have been any changes to risk, operations, programs, systems, or controls. Risk is defined as the possibility of something happening that will have an impact on the achievement of objectives, whether those objectives could be related to something financial, performance, compliance, operational, strategic, public perception. And risk is commonly measured in terms of impact or consequences and likelihood or probability. So if you see your visual and want to, some of you who've already had your comprehensive risk assessment input meeting with me are familiar with this Exhibit A on the next page with the measurements of impact and probability. We'll circle back to this when we get to the next page. A risk assessment is the overall process of risk analysis and evaluation to ensure that an entity has sufficient and continuous internal audit coverage of those areas judged as having a relatively high risk profile, considering both impact and likelihood. It also helps to optimize the assignment of internal audit resources. I'm currently in the process of gathering information to determine areas of potential risk. That process includes analyzing data, conducting interviews, reviewing relevant documents such as documented procedures and prior audit findings. This process is about 90 to 95% complete, and it should be completed by the end of February, should I get all of my interviews done and documentation turned in. Once this analysis is complete, the areas reviewed will be categorized in terms of audit response. So if we take a look at Exhibit B, along with, if it helps you to figure out how these areas would be categorized. So if we took a look at the first example on Exhibit A, where it's high probability, low impact. So if we looked at our schedule on Exhibit B, where it's high probability, which is the likelihood of occurrence, so we'll be at the end, if you will, of the arrow, and the low impact, which would be the bottom of the impact scale, that puts you in the matrix of periodic review. Going forward, low probability, low impact will put you at monitoring. Low probability, high impact will put you at periodic. And high probability and high impact will be a high priority item. So a menu of some of the items that I've so far in my comprehensive risk assessment with the responses that I've gotten back from the questionnaire, nothing so far has put us in the area of the high priority. Still gathering information. And then also I have been keeping track of possible audit topics, if you will. I call them the menu. If we've had our meeting already, this is the menu of items. And so these will be labeled as far as what the audit response would be going forward. So these categorizations will be the framework for my audit plan. So at our next auditor selection committee meeting, which I'm hoping to be March after spring break, since I won't get the responses back in or be done with the whole thing until the end of February. We will go over the risk assessment results and determine how best to proceed as far as assignment of internal board audit resources. Then we will meet again to go over my audit plan, which will include audit plan details, budgeted hours, assignment of resources, audit plan schedule, and goals and performance measures. If you agree with the audit plan as presented, I will bring it back as an agenda item to be approved at the next scheduled regular board meeting in April. And then if it's approved, I will begin the audits. So if you are hoping to have a timeline of those points that I just mentioned, if you just look at I'm sorry for the small font for some. This is kind of like a timeline. So gathering of information should be complete by February 26th. Review of the risk assessment results should be around about March 16th. And I haven't discussed these dates with any of you, or so I don't know if there's any conflict. This is just my pie in the sky. Review of the proposed audit plan will be a week later, which is March 23rd. Approval of the audit plan will be April 6th. And then the audits begin on April 7th. And that is all that I have for the status of the comprehensive risk assessment.
Are there any questions about the comprehensive risk assessment? This is sort of the foundational piece for the work that Ms. Blades will do. So as soon as we can get this completed and analyzed, then she'll be auditing. Any questions about this timeline? Okay. The only thing that I'm thinking of as we're having this conversation is just making sure that there is time again for this board to get back together to review the proposed audit plan in a timely manner so that it would be approved as an agenda item, is your suggestion, correct? Mm-hmm. And so we'll need to look at sort of the dates for the timeline. I'm happy to do that work and make sure that it fits in with the other priorities of the board and the district, if that pleases the board. Okay. Any other questions about the comprehensive risk assessment? If you haven't already had your opportunity, I think most people, you're only waiting on a couple other people to meet with Ms. Blades. Okay, then the only other thing on our agenda for this committee meeting today is to look at the evaluation process for Ms. Blades. We have not had an evaluation for her yet either. She did provide us a self-evaluation back in, I want to say it was maybe November at our last audit selection committee meeting. And so my thought process is that we've not had any time, either formally or informally, to have individual one-on-one feedback meetings with her on that. So my suggestion would be that we go ahead and schedule those informal meetings with her individually on your own timeline, but we need to kind of set a deadline for that. And then we can look at starting a more formal evaluation process with a specific evaluation tool, which the evaluation subcommittee is working on developing. Both Ms. Blades and the evaluation subcommittee shared with me the tool from Lake County. So they were sort of aligned in that making sense for her scope and duties and responsibilities. So I anticipate that when we get around to a more formal evaluation process in June, is that what we said? I think that aligns with sort of the district evaluation timeline. Then we can make sure that she is on track with that rubric. But certainly before that time, we want to give her some feedback on what she's already been accomplishing for us. And the only thing we have at this moment to do that is her own self-evaluation tool from back in November. So if that all sounds like a good plan to you, then what we might do then is go ahead and set a deadline. I can't remember what we said. For the informal?
No,
Like this month, right?
Yes, February.
So I'd like, I think that that's probably the best course of action is to try to get those meetings scheduled by the end of February with Ms. Blades. And if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Blades, sending that documentation again to the board, just so that it is at the top of our list. Your own self-evaluation that you shared with us, I want to say back in November.
Goals for my area, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll look.
I think it was the November workshop.
We can get together and look, but we'll make sure that we get those documents back out to you. And then if you'll make sure that you have some time to meet to just provide individual feedback on those with Ms. Blades by the end of the month, so we can move forward with a more formal evaluation in fairness to her and her position and wanting to get some feedback from us. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns about board auditor evaluation? Ms. Blades, do you have questions about the evaluation process that we're proposing?
No, but I would like to state that I know some of these areas, and I'll probably speak with you individually about it. It looks as though, nothing has been done, but there's been some background work being done in my area as far as establishing procedures and documenting a lot of the work. If I had to describe it as, you all see the cake, but you don't see the ingredients that go into the cake. And it's a lot of ingredients, and because a part of our work is we have to document everything we do, because once I start releasing my audits, I will have a peer review. I need to have a peer review done every 3 years. And so those individuals have to come in and look at the documentation that I use in order to come to the conclusions that I have concluded. And so a lot of that takes time as far as coming up with what is my work paper going to look like? What are my procedures to say that this work paper? So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes on in my position. So again, you don't see the cake, which is the audit report, but there's some other stuff going, the ingredients. I'm gathering them, I'm documenting them, so I just kind of wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Ms. Blades. At some point, as we move forward and we look at what the audit plan is, and we've got some more direction with what the district needs and what we need as a board from Ms. Blades, we'll really want to make sure that the expectation is realistic and that she is able to deliver as one individual in this role. And so until we can get to a place where we're having some of these evaluative conversations and we understand what the scope of the expectation is, I think that'll be a challenge. So I'm looking forward to being able to get that audit plan together. Any other?
I do.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Joyce.
I know that in the past, we have briefly gone over a little PowerPoint that I put together of an audit selection committee. And I understand that we are the audit selection committee, but I also want to recognize that this is not in my wheelhouse and this is not what I'm an expert in. And so in that presentation, lots of other large districts have a subcommittee of professionals that kind of help interpret the information or, you know, break it down or ask questions that maybe we wouldn't think to ask. And I think that this committee is, and when you look at the policy for this committee, I think it's just so important that we have probably some more people on the committee that really understands this work. And so I would like to just bring that back before the board again for a conversation, is to maybe, is that something we want to consider moving forward? Is to, and it might not be it might be just a few people to sit with us during these meetings to ask questions that maybe we didn't think of or something like that. But I would like to engage in that conversation and kind of get a sense of the appetite of the board to maybe pursue that.
And I appreciate you bringing that conversation back around. My thought is perhaps we can add it as an item to the next audit selection committee meeting, and in interest of time for today. And that way we have the appropriate headspace and time to be able to engage in that discussion if we need to have a more thorough review.
I'd like to add, in my research with doing and updating my charter, I did come across some board conversation, if you will, about an auditor selection committee. At the time, it was called an audit committee. And it was determined, I don't know the details of that because they were Michelle's work papers, if you will, or her emails that she shared with me. So I might be able to get with her, or if you all want me to gather some background information with why the board decided to go ahead and just stay as the board and not bring in those outside members. If that is the desire of the board, I could try to get that information as well.
I think that could be helpful historical information. I also know that there were times when there were other positions slated to be part of the internal board audit department, but Ms. Bagley did that typically on her own, although there have been other job codes for it. I've also asked the district to pull together other information about internal board audit roles in other like-sized districts, so I expect to have, actually that's already been delivered to me, I just haven't had a chance to review that. So I think that can all be part of a conversation, is what does this committee look like? What do we want it to look like? What do we want the internal board auditor's role to be? If we want it to be anything different than what she proposes as part of the audit plan. So I think that there's certainly room for more conversation. Ms. Hershey.
I just want to remind us all that, you know, we get the information before the meeting, and we all currently have the right to take that information to anybody we want to seek input for our own personal well-being. So while the conversation might be delayed, there's no reason for any board member who might have a question or might need, you know, want more information or another set of eyes to look at it. That is something that we are all capable of seeking that extra expertise if we want currently. There's nothing stopping any board member from sitting down with somebody and saying, you know, help me understand this, or give me another set of eyes or a different perspective by seeking other professionals currently. So I just, you know, I just think that's information that's important to have, because no matter how the conversation turns out, that's always an option for a board member who wants to sit down with somebody else who might be more of an expert in an area, and then you can bring that back to, you know, as your expertise, as you've been advised by someone else.
Thank you. I appreciate that that feedback reminder. If there is nothing further for the audit selection committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by board member Jones, seconded by board member Joyce. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. One day we're gonna get out of here before 2 o'clock.
I just don't think so.
The key keep working on it.
Tomorrow.
I just
We
don't
keep
think it's
working.
gonna happen.
Yeah, tomorrow.
How long have we,
That's why I said
been doing this?
Well, the superintendent said, do you want me to plan on having sandwiches available for you all at all workshop meetings? I was like, we are gonna get out of here. We are going to move the work. And every time I intend to like keep this on pace and then conversation is rich and I wanna make sure everyone has an opportunity to hear it. We'll keep it, I'll keep honing my time management skills.
Cindy, what time are you texting me tomorrow approximately? Since you're my ride to Howie in the Hills, and I've never
Oh my
told
gosh,
you
it was
Howie
so
in
much
the Hills is so
fun.
much fun.
Enjoy.
I would say from I think for game like next week first, because that gives you
I'm so sorry, I gotta get with her this afternoon too. So,
you want me to reach back out to you, or you will reach out to us?
send me an email.
Okay.
And then I'll respond. And I
Okay.
probably won't respond till tomorrow, because I got 3 Zoom meetings this afternoon.
Bye, thank you, Lena.
And when you think about how it's been the starters, like the material separates that.
Not 3 yet.
I mean, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that far.
All that we had to accomplish. No, yesterday I went home and was like, okay, I had to chill for like 2 hours. I was like, just.
So, you
We
know,
got a
Netflix.
lot of work done today, actually, now that I'm reflecting, we did.
Well, what happens is
Building
you,
a
something
showcase.
moves faster than you think it is, and then something moves slower than you think it will.
Well, I was really concerned about all the governments, because I knew we had so many governments.
That's what, somebody told me.
I think it's good for you.
Yeah, and lunch is a good thing. Like, I obviously check out after a little while, so lunch
Yeah.
is good to have.
I did a reading thing with my parents in Landon and did a book study thing, and I wanted to see the board for it, so I went for, I did for that one time.
yeah, by.
And I remember thinking, because you just drive and all of a sudden it's like on a hill in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, oh, that's it.
My in-laws live near
Thank you, everyone.
I grew up in Mandarin on almost 6 acres. Mandarin was the sticks. I never want to live in that.
That's funny.
Some people love living out in the country. I never want to live.
All right, I'm gonna go throw this upstairs.
And I'm gonna we are gonna come back around. I had.
We will let you know how it goes.
President's Chastain, that sort of member to member meeting minute item.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully we'll bring that back around and,
Tell your husband good luck.
Yeah, and that was
Friday.
all in
Government.
orientation, so I can pull up those documents. I got
Well,
those
I sent you the picture.
back.
that would be good.
Oh,
That would be
gonna totally
good. Yeah,
mess
there's a
with that.
couple.
That's awesome.
And then the,
All right.
tracking our budget is another one that I wanna bring up, so.
Hi, I'm,
Travel.
Yeah, I'm collecting
Kelly, did you
some
get your
more
travel
information.
folder? Do we have a travel folder? Okay. Do I have my travel folder?
No, I was gonna ask you guys, they're up in your, oh, okay, you've got yours, okay, yours is in
I'll
your
come up
box
and get
still,
mine.
so.
Oh, my box, I keep forgetting.
Oh. Well, you get the board run, like every week, so we pull out whatever's in your box, and you get it once a week to do the
I
board
don't
run.
do the
but-
board run.
Huh?
I don't do the board run.
Oh, okay.
Because I am close by.
Yeah, you're in
I
a
just-
lot. Some board members, we may only see them a few times a month, so there's a
Well,
board.
it's just really easy for me, because I literally ran past here this morning,
Yeah.
It's part of my neighborhood.
Well, do you want me to run up and?
No, I'm gonna come up. I have
Run
an
come up?
hour.
Okay, I
until-
wasn't sure, I should have brought a deal, because I really didn't
it's
know for
fine.
sure if you were coming out.
I have an hour before I have to pick up Paige, so I'm just gonna read
Oh, okay, okay.
emails,
Let
and
me
I'm gonna
grab
take
a-
care of emails.
girl, let me shut this.
Are you going upstairs?
I am not.
I'm going. I'm
I
leaving.
don't have anything else. I'm out of here. What are we supposed to do with these binders? Did you turn yours back in?
Mine's
Do we
at home.
keep
I
them?
want to keep mine for.
Yeah, for the next one. I just wasn't sure whether we were supposed to. I'll walk around with a darn bag lady all the time. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I need like one of those rolling carts or something.